Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by 𝗵𝘃𝗃 on Wattpad. Now, let's start. Izuku Midoriya, 14, in his last year of junior high, was walking down the street to his school. A large brick building known as 𝗧𝗪𝗓 Junior High, not exactly the most high and prestigious school there was. Even with the bullying rate and how the students lost every sports day, Midoriya seemed to enjoy it there. He always paid the most attention to lessons on quirks and heroes, his favorite topic as he aspired to be a certified hero in the quirk world he lived in. Alas, others said that was never to be. Our protagonist Izuku was quirkless. The rather short, green-haired male picked up his pace as he ran to his school, hearing the bell go off before he reached the gates. As quickly as he could, Midoriya raced through the halls to reach first PRD. Nearly there. Midoriya felt a hand latch onto his shoulder, heating up and making steam billow upwards. He bit back a scream and turned around to face the tall blonde figure of Katsuki Bakugou. Kacchan, I didn't think you'd be this late now. You'll never be a hero if you're late on the job like this. The taller taunted, putting both his hands on Midoriya's shoulders until the green-haired male let out a squeak of pain. Bakugou merely snorted. Not like you'll even come close to being a hero. Quirkless wannabe. Why don't you choose a career more within your skills? A garbage man will do perfectly. Bakugou scorned, laughing and finally letting the other go, who quickly rubbed his shoulders and blew at the steam. Midoriya was supposed to hate Bakugou, as the other plainly did, but just couldn't. It was cliché and he knew it, how the bully victim is secretly in love with the bully, but he couldn't help it. The schoolboy crush had started in nursery and had just progressed from there as the two had grown up together, side by side. Midoriya had cherished every second of it. They even had childish nicknames for each other. Katsuki was Kacchan and Izuku was Deku. Deku had always wondered why Bakugou had kept the nickname, but had never dared ask. Kacchan, please let me get to first PRD. Midoriya pleaded quietly, though half expected the response he was given. No. I'm late too, idiot. I need an excuse of why I'm not there. Give me a late slip. Bakugou pushed Midoriya into the male's bathroom, holding him against the wall roughly as the shorter quickly fumbled with a note. This was one of the reasons Bakugou kept bugging Midoriya, so that he could have late slips, hall passes, prescriptions and medical notes to skip school. Being quirkless and weak, Midoriya had always agreed so he wouldn't get hurt so much. Once the note was written, Bakugou took it from Midoriya and smirked, "Thanks nerd. Not as useless as usual." He snickered before turning and walking to lesson. Midoriya quickly followed behind as Bakugou read over their note. To Izuku and Katsuki's teacher, "I'm sorry the boys are late to first lesson. They had been held up along the way but everything is fine now. Inko Midoriya." Bakugou was going to protest at how Midoriya had included himself when the blonde thought of the cleverness of it. Bakugou's mother wouldn't write him a note and his teacher knew all too well the note would be fake if it were just him. But Izuku Midoriya being there too would make it more believable as he attended every lesson on time. He shook his head as they finally reached first PRD. Midoriya handed in the note before quickly rushing to his seat and sitting down at it, keeping his gaze down. "Midoriya, why are your shoulders steaming?" the teacher asked, jolting the messy-haired boy from his thoughts. Bakugou tensed up in his seat, glaring at Midoriya warningly. If the teacher found out, Bakugou would be screwed. It is. Oh. Never noticed." Midoriya laughed nervously, patting his shoulders and trying to ignore the searing pain. He smiled at his teacher, who just rolled their eyes and went on with the lesson that had been interrupted. Though Midoriya tried to concentrate, Bakugou's gaze burned through his skull, making his mind go blank. The day ran rather smoothly. As smoothly as it could, being the life of Midoriya. By the end of school, he had a new scrape on his cheek from when he'd hit the wall after being pushed. He was rubbing it as he picked up his backpack and started to quickly rush out of the classroom. "Deku, slow your butt down." He inwardly groaned at the familiar voice, straightened himself, then turned and smiled at Bakugou, who did anything but return it. I need a new prescription for my medications. The old hag thinks it's a good idea to cut off my supply. Midoriya merely nodded, starting to write out the note. He stopped and leaned against the wall to get it written, only to feel pressure on his back. Bakugou would usually do this to embarrass the shorter male, as he would get flustered. He smirked as he saw Midoriya's face heat up and his hand tremble a little on his pencil. Bakugou pressed him closer against the wall, pulling Midoriya back onto reality until he finished the prescription note. Thanks, nerd. Bakugou laughed, pulling back and waving the note back and forth as he started to walk down the road. Midoriya tried to hide his blush as he quickly ran after the other, not fully recovered from the closeness of their bodies, so his face was still red. Is Deku blushing? Bakugou teased, knowing full well that Midoriya was. The green-haired boy just shook his head in denial, feeling himself get pushed down an alleyway quickly after. Bakugou's hand sparked up as his quirk activated, unnerving Midoriya. Lying now. Wow, nerd, I didn't take you for the stupid type. He slammed his hand against the wall beside Midoriya's head, making him squirm away a little at the combustion of flames. Bakugou was laughing mockingly until he felt something shove his head forward and then something warm against his lips. As he adjusted to the situation, he realized he was looking down at a bright red Midoriya, staring up at him with wide eyes. Bakugou pulled away from the kiss and from the boy completely, whirling around to see who'd caused their quick kiss. No one was there. Midoriya slid down the wall, his face bright red but covered by his hands. Bakugou snorted, pretending to have intentionally kissed Deku to fluster him. It had worked either way. He wiped his lips on his sleeve and stared down at Midoriya, who had his hands over his mouth. Don't read too much into this, Deku. You're still a piece of ass. As Bakugou walked off, Midoriya couldn't help but notice the fact that Bakugou hadn't called him useless or worthless. 369 Bakugou walked back home alone, holding the note with a light pink dusting his cheeks from the kiss. It was noticeably less of a reaction than Midoriya, but if you knew who Bakugou was you'd see that it was quite different from usual. Bakugou kicked a rock as he finally wound up home. His mother wasn't in, so he just lounged on the sofa boredly, thinking about what had happened in the alleyway. It was stupid, probably some cupid quirked idiot trying to pull a prank. He was a little more at ease and less red in the face at that conclusion. His phone buzzed beside him, showing that his friends were asking him if he wanted to cause some havoc. He smirked, standing up and stretching as he walked out of the house. His classmates knew him so well. Bakugou was completely unaware of what Midoriya was feeling and what would change him forever. Midoriya was holding a pillow and writing in his hero booklet. The reason he was a nerd wasn't because he was fond of maths or science, more for quirks. Being quirkless meant they seemed even more interesting to him in ways none of his classmates, especially Bakugou, would understand. He sighed happily, thinking of the ash-blonde male and their earlier encounter. They had kissed. Midoriya knew how childish it was, but he squeaked anyway and hugged his pillow close to him. It had felt quite nice if he were honest, even if a little forced. Bakugou had seemed surprised that he was actually kissing me, maybe even more so than I was. He thought, looking at the ceiling until his phone went off in his pocket. Hey loser, I need more notes since I lost my other one walking back home. Drop one off at my house. The message read. Now that he didn't have the pressure on his back and jelly legs, Midoriya wrote the note quickly and stumbled down the stairs, walking past about 2 houses before he reached Bakugou's. He walked to the door and knocked on, only to feel his wrist get pulled into the house and the door slamming shut behind him. He held the note out to Bakugou, who took it and put it on the desk beside him, merely shrugging it off. That struck Midoriya as peculiar, but he said nothing as he turned to leave. He couldn't. His front was pressed firmly against the wall as a force held his hands to his side. What's the hurry, Izuku? A voice purred in his ear. He turned his head to look into the oddly glassy gaze of Katsuki. The taller male was smirking at him devilishly, which was definitely not like him in the slightest. The thing that made Midoriya the most uneasy, though, was his bully crush calling him by his formal first name. Not like Bakugou at all. Midoriya just stared at him, eyes wide in shock at their situation until he felt little nibbles on his exposed neck. This was not Bakugou. Something had changed when Bakugou had gone out with his friends that was causing this, but Midoriya was unaware as his face turned from normal to bright red. Kacchan, what are you doing? He yelped as he felt someone biting onto his neck, muffling a quiet mmm at the feeling. The not-so-Bakugou scared at the spot until there was a mark, then moved down, nibbling and kissing as Midoriya had started to struggle. Kacchan, let me go. This isn't you. He squeaked desperately, managing to kick Bakugou in the knee and getting him to free Midoriya. The kick must have knocked something though, as the odd look Bakugou had was replaced by a confused scowl as he looked around. The glassiness was gone from his eyes as they landed on Midoriya. What the F are you doing in my house, Deku? Bakugou growled at a red-faced, sweating and breathing shorter boy. Why you told me to come over because you lost your prescription slip, so I did. Midoriya tried hiding the hickey on his neck out of embarrassment. Bakugou saw it and snorted. Who the hell did that to you? I pity them, having to deal with you. How salty. Hurt flashed into Midoriya's gaze as it fell, his blush fading. You did. Just then. He murmured, hugging himself tightly. Bakugou was taken off guard by this, but waved it off quickly. Gross, get back home you nerd. He then turned and stomped off, hiding his bright red place. Then it all came back. There had been a person with the quirk Cupid. They'd shot Bakugou with an arrow on his way home, and the first thing he'd seen had been Midoriya's name as he'd been looking down at his contacts. That's when he'd texted Midoriya, love struck, and raced to get back home in time. His face heated up even more once he'd realized what he'd done. When he turned to try and explain himself, Midoriya was already gone. Back at his home, Midoriya was laying on his bed with a bright red and blushing face. He held his face in his hands, trying to rub said blush away, but to no avail. He kisses me first, then gives me a hickey. He thought, confused and flustered at the same time. It was so much so that he pulled his knees to his chest and squeaked happily. Perhaps his crush wasn't such an odd choice after all. Maybe Bakugou liked him back. All the thought whirled around Midoriya's mind, making him squeak again. In the meantime, though, he'd need to find out a way to hide the love bite. A hoodie? No, his school had a set uniform. A scarf? That would be too obvious. He finally decided on flicking his collar up and tightening his tie for the next day. 96 times skipped to next day. Midoriya was seated in lesson, taking notes as usual. He was lost in his thoughts as the teacher called his name over and over again, finally raising his voice loud enough to break through. Midoriya! He looked up so suddenly that his chair wobbled and he fell back. The entire class burst into laughter, making Midoriya blush from embarrassment. Dang it! He was doing so well. Once you get back into your seat, please answer my question, Midoriya. The teacher glared at him, unamused by his fall. Midoriya nodded, quickly standing up and pulling his chair into the feet. As he sat back down, he stared at the whiteboard blankly. He hadn't been paying attention to anything. 𝗬𝗵, could you repeat the question? Yes, sir. He stuttered, earning a snicker from Bakugou. Useless nerd. He heard the taller mock under his breath, making his expression fall a little. If you insist, what are the two types of parentheses used in the text? Midoriya's mind went blank. He had no idea what was going on in the lesson as he hadn't been listening. He started to panic, the other sounds being blocked out. His hands started sweating and his breathing quickened as he was now fully aware of the entire class's eyes on him. Some were giving him odd looks, others scared and others confused. Deku. Midoriya looked over at Bakugou, who was staring at him like the rest of the class. Sir. He's having a panic attack. He called. The thought of having another attack made him panic more, his gaze narrowing so that only Bakugou was in his field of vision, telling him to concentrate. He was trying to. Take him outside, Bakugou. You seem to know what's going on. The teacher's voice was barely audible and it took a rough tug from the ash-blonde male to get Midoriya to stand. His legs were wobbly and his steps were uneven, meaning Bakugou practically had to drag him into the corridor and towards the boys' bathroom. As the two had grown up together, Naturally, Bakugou had seen this before. This was only mild. It's not like Bakugou cared or was worried, he just wanted an excuse to be out of lesson. He leaned against the wall as Midoriya sat against it, rocking back and forth and holding his knees close to his chest. He took a few deep breaths of air, exhaling slowly. Once he seemed stable, Bakugou crouched beside him, the same uncaring and bored expression on his face. Okay, shitty nerd, what triggered it this time? Was it that stupid English question? The answer was comma and bracket, by the way. You know this CRP. Bakugou seemed annoyed, making Midoriya tremble. Why, yeah, it was the question. But I've been stressing a lot more recently, and if that P probably contribute dash. He was shut up by a hand squishing his cheeks together. Stupid Deku, stop stuttering. If you can't speak, you can't speak. Don't force it. Bakugou stood up, his hands in his black uniform pocket. What are you stressing about? If you can manage it out without becoming a stuttering thing mess again. Midoriya stood up, leaning against the wall for support. He took a few more breaths, not being able to help stuttering a little. Why, you won't hurt me when I tell you, right? Bakugou tilted his head, yet shook it. I know how unstable you can get like this, loser. So no, not this time. I don't need you blubbering at my feet like some 2-year-old. Midoriya closed his eyes so he wouldn't see Bakugou's reaction as he told him what was stressing him the most. You. The single word didn't surprise or anger Bakugou in the slightest. He was an butt and he knew it, fully accepting how he bullied people and just going with it. It did, however, in the slightest, tiniest bit hurt for some reason. So he caused Deku to have another panic attack. At least it wasn't too big. Specify. What? Don't make me repeat myself. I said specify, you useless nerd. Bakugou yelled, making Midoriya flinch. WL. Yesterday after school when you. Midoriya's face heated up as he pointed to his neck, the hickey hidden by his collar and tie. Bakugou tensed, looking away. That wasn't me. That was some Cupid quirked but messing with me on the way home. Yours was the first contact I saw, and you know how Cupid goes. He grumbled, his foot slammed against the wall beside Midoriya's head. What else? Midoriya carried on listing a few things, flinching every time Bakugou moved as he was scared of getting hurt. And how I feel like I'm a disappointment and a disgrace, how I have no quirk and no friends, how my only use is to write out stupid notes, how I'm gay, how dash, and that was where he stopped, his eyes widening as he realized what he said. I mean dash, you're what? And no. I'm nothing dash, tell me. Now. Bakugou crouched down to his level, glaring at him ferociously. Gay. There, and now you know. Midoriya murmured at last, looking away from Bakugou and squeezing his eyes shut. He heard the bell go off and sneaked a look back up. Bakugou was gone. KacchanxDeku. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 546 Another time skip. I'm lazy 44. Midoriya had walked into the food hall and sat at a table by himself, silently eating his lunch like usual. He passed the time by going to the library and drawing, occasionally thinking that he saw Bakugou, but telling himself it couldn't be as Bakugou was probably avoiding him. By last period, Midoriya was in his seat, biting the end of his pencil as he worked. Nearing the end of the lesson, the teacher collected in all the work and sat at his desk. Now, I know the end of junior high is quite far away, but I hope everyone here has chosen which high school they're hoping to go to. Remember, first, second and third options are to be kept in mind. Your forms must be in by the end of next week. He told the class. Naturally, everyone wanted to go to UA, the hero school. It's where all the pro heroes were trained, even All Might. All Might? Never heard of him. Have you been living under a rock for this generation? All Might was the #1 hero. Topping everyone out there, even Endeavor. All Might was practically everyone's inspiration, especially quirkless Midoriya's. Even though Midoriya had no quirk, he wanted to go to UA. He wanted to get into the hero course and become a pro hero. That was his dream, ever since he was little. Sir, it's pretty obvious everyone wants to go to UA, so who's already handed in their forms with that as first? One student asked. The teacher contemplated the thought before bringing out a few files, reading through them then chuckling to himself. 2 students. Katsuki Bakugou and the whole class knew Bakugou would choose UA, but no one, not even the teacher, had anticipated the other student. Izuku Midoriya. And suddenly all eyes were on the green-haired boy again, and laughter was the only sound filling the room. The laughs echoed around the classroom, and all Midoriya could do was look around, an embarrassed and scared look on his face. They weren't laughing with him, they were mocking him with their laughter. He locked eyes with Bakugou, any sense of softness from before was gone, replaced by rage. The bell went for the school to be let out and the teacher left the classroom. Group by group, the class piled out after him, still laughing and talking among themselves. There were only 2 students remaining. Kacchan. Midoriya murmured, watching the other pack his stuff slowly and throw his backpack over his shoulder. The green-haired boy collected his things and walked over to Bakugou hesitantly. 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗲 he was cut off by a loud bang as he was thrown against the wall in a fiery blast. He hit the back wall of the classroom and slid down it until he was sat down, his back and front aching from the force. He trembled as Bakugou roughly shoved the chairs and desks to the side, toppling over ones that hadn't already been thrown over. "You useless nerd," Bakugou yelled, his hands sparking mote explosions. "I'm supposed to be the one who gets into UA from this shitty hellhole they call a school. Me. I'm so much better than the likes of you. I will not let my reputation be ruined by you following me around, especially before the entrance exam even starts. You're just a pathetic, replaceable, quirkless loser." He spat, sending another blast at the terrified shorter boy. Tears formed in Midoriya's eyes as he stared up at the enraged Bakugou. "I just want a chance. Please don't just do us all a favor and die already. It will make my life so much easier." Now that struck hard. That much was obvious from how Midoriya fell silent, letting his tears overrun as he stumbled to his feet. Realization of what he'd said washed over Bakugou and he realized he'd taken it too far. "Wait, hang on he tried to stop Midoriya as he walked away, but couldn't. "No. I get it. I'm just a waste of space, right? I'm just making your image look bad. I just wish you'd told me sooner. Then I would have been out of your way. I don't want to ruin your success. Deku, hold up Bye. Kacchan." And he was gone, smiling that broken smile. He wore that same smile the entire walk home, knowing he could let go once he was at home as his mother was out. Midoriya took the long route back though, hiding under a bridge and finally letting the sadness show. He couldn't even express how much the sadness was overwhelming, dominating his other feelings. It made him feel numb and less aware of his surroundings. "Why do I even try? I'm just wasted oxygen here. I wish I was never born, people would be so much happier that way. Not I, little boy." The voice came from the shadows. That shadow grew, loud squelching, muddy sounds resounding around the underside of the bridge. Midoriya leapt to his feet, backing up with wide eyes. In front of him stood Slithered, the large sludge villain. The villain was looking for a human vessel, and Midoriya had walked straight into his clutches. Everyone who knows the true Boku no Hero Academia, My Hero Academia, ought to know this scene. It's pretty iconic, after all. The mud villain sprang up, attacking Midoriya without hesitation and lifting him up off the ground. Midoriya screamed loudly, feeling himself get pushed against a wall and something being forced down his throat and ears. He struggled, his screams muffled as he desperately tried to claw away the sludge monster, now suffocating him. It didn't take long for his squirming to grow slower, the suffocation working how the villain wanted it to. Finally, he'd get a true human body. Midoriya's head fell back, his eyes rolling back into his skull. The villain had won. Or so it seemed. With a loud crash, a figure seemed to fly from nowhere and land at the end of the tunnel. It was none other than the #1 pro hero, All Might. The pro had been closely following the trail of the sludge monster and the scream of a child had gotten his attention. It took a moment of fighting that flew by in seconds before All Might was found victorious, the villain safely tucked away in a dirty water bottle he'd found. The bottle was in his pocket so it would be in his sight as he stood over the body of the child. All Might picked the teenager up, a booklet falling out of his backpack. Quickly picking it up, the hero read the name on the front as Midoriya. Quickly, the smiling hero turned to see a tall-ish blonde boy, about the same age as the green one in his arms, round the corner and stop at the sight. What happened to him? Is he dead? Is he breathing? I swear, if he doesn't wake up I'll kill you. The boy ran forward, taking Midoriya from All Might and holding him bridal style. The sudden questions and blatant threat had thrown All Might off a little, but he just waved his hand in dismissal, his smile still wide. He'll be fine. Just get him some help. All Might chuckled, turning to leave as he thought Midoriya was out cold. Wait. A weak yet definitely audible voice sounded from the boy he'd saved. Turning back around, All Might saw his head back up and facing him. Please. All Might, I'll listen to my question and tell me something. Midoriya looked up, tears still in his eyes from the attack. Is it possible for me to become a hero without a quirk? The boy holding Midoriya tensed up, staring down at his face with something unreadable in his gaze. All Might was jolted back to the question as the boy Midoriya spoke his name. All Might. Please. Answer the question. All Might took a deep breath before walking over to them and crouching to their level. Young Midoriya. What you are asking is not something I get asked very often. I'm sorry, but there isn't a way for someone quirkless to become a hero. As displayed just now, an ordinary human would have died. Against a villain. Sadly, this is the way it is. If that's your dream then, I advise you look for another one. One within your reach, given how you are. And with that, All Might waved as he stood up and flew off, seemingly in a hurry. 𝗬𝗏 Bakugou had watched the entire talk play out, his eyes wide. Deku, save it, Kacchan. What's said is said. I've just been holding on to a childish fantasy for too long. Midoriya's voice was small and broken, his head down as he thought over what his idol had said. Please. Just take me home so I can rest. I can't walk properly. For once, Bakugou obliged. Even as much as he despised Midoriya, he couldn't deny it was rather saddening to see everything play out. After all that talk over the years they'd spent together of them both becoming heroes, Midoriya's dream was shattered right in front of him. For once, Bakugou had no words. He felt an overwhelming sense of protection wash over him, urging him to look after the boy in his arms. He couldn't though. Anything he said would be lies to Midoriya, after all the verbal abuse he'd received from Bakugou in the past. Instead, Bakugou took a deep breath and murmured to him. I'm sure you'll get into UA. You'll get in with your own weird Deku way, you always do. You're anything but a waste of space. Midoriya was distraught. He didn't speak to anyone for 2 days, he didn't leave his room or even go to school. He'd taken down some of his old Plus Ultra and anyone can be a hero posters in his room. They were all lies, objects that just revealed the horrible truth over and over again. As much as Midoriya wanted to shrug it off as another one of his wide smiles, he couldn't. Truthfully, he wasn't okay one bit. The man he's looked up to the most had told him face to face he couldn't be a hero. Midoriya could look out his window and see small children, running wound with their quirks fully activated. That was something Midoriya would never experience. He sighed, checking his phone. All his messages had been from Bakugou, asking if he needed an excuse for being off school and just asking if he was okay. The change of heart was seemingly nice, but Midoriya didn't believe that Bakugou wanted to help him. He had been exposed to the truth, everything was lies and fakeness now. Eventually though, Midoriya had to return to school. As he walked through the door to his lesson, a few people snickered at what had happened the last time Midoriya was in. The class had came to the conclusion to see Midoriya had not came in because he was embarrassed by what had happened, while Bakugou tried to tell them that, the nerd is just sick. Shut the F up about him already. He took his seat, leaning on his arms and gazing at the ceiling as the lesson droned on. He was unaware of the red eyes of a certain protector casting glances at him to see if he was okay. Bakugou had become noticeably less insulting and rude to Midoriya, though obviously that didn't stop. He'd still tease the shorter male and ask for permission slips for things. He also didn't stop pressing against Midoriya to fluster him, as it made his own heart beat faster for a few moments. As the day finally came to a close, Midoriya had stayed behind to talk to his teacher about some homework, and Bakugou had gone ahead, kicking random pieces of litter as he went. There was his ordinary scowl on his face as he kicked a dirty water bottle, making the lid fly off in a random direction. He took no notice of it though, and frankly didn't care as he leaned against the wall of an alleyway. Stupid Deku, getting himself into situations like that and having someone else save him. Bakugou grunted, looking into the streets. He tensed up suddenly, his eyes widening at a bone-chilling voice coming from behind him. He turned around and shouted loudly as his eyes rested on a large, muddy figure that had an evil smirk on its face. Bakugou didn't exactly care about facial details right at that moment, as the sludge monster had chosen its time and pounced. Midoriya ran through the streets, his backpack whacking against his back as he followed a crowd making quite a lot of commotion. Curiosity killed the Deku, in this case. Pushing his way through the loud crowd, Midoriya asked a few people what was going on to make such a ruckus. Everyone pointed to the view ahead and, oh god! It was him again. The sludge monster, seemingly fighting itself with flames and destruction following its wake. It was down an alleyway, so the only entrance had been blocked off and guarded by a ton of officers. There were heroes on the job, punching and kicking at the villain but only being able to do as much as Midoriya could do. Not much. The villain whacked against the alleyway wall and Midoriya could finally see what it was fighting. He really wished he hadn't. His eyes widened as he stares at the sludge monster who had taken on a new victim, struggling while being suffocated. Angry swears and explosions were set off at random due to the captured boy trying to escape. It was a boy Midoriya knew so well. Before he could think of how suicidal his plan was, his legs were already yanking him forward, screaming, "Kakken!" The hostage opened his wild eyes at his name and saw none other than Midoriya. Quirkless little Midoriya, running straight at the villain with his backpack swinging around his head. Once he'd gotten close enough, he let go of the pack and threw it at the villain, occupying him momentarily. This gave Midoriya enough time to run to Bakugou's aid and start to desperately attempt to claw away at the sludgy mess. Yells of "Kid! And you boy!" yelled after Midoriya as he lunged into the battle, trying to scrape away as much muddy substance as he could. He gave the trapped Bakugou room to breath and the captured let out a gasp, inhaling the air quickly. "Deku! You're going to get yourself killed." He couldn't speak as the mud was back, forcing down his throat. The villain had finally gotten bored of the backpack and had turned to Midoriya, desperately trying to free Bakugou. "Deku!" And Bakugou managed out through the choking mud. Midoriya shook his head viciously, train at the sludge as much as humanly possible. "I'm not going to stand here and let you die, you hear me?" The green-haired boy yelled in between tears and scoops. Everything seemed hopeless. The sludge kept reforming every time Midoriya scooped it away. Bakugou was starting to grow tired of struggling and the pro-heroes were getting nowhere. Then, out of nowhere, there was an almighty crack and All Might, in all his muscular glory, stood in the alleyway, facing the villain head-on. It all happened so fast after that. Midoriya stood to the side and watched in awe as All Might saved Bakugou and terminated the villain. Still smiling. It was an amazing sight. The aftermath, though, was Midoriya getting chewed out by the other heroes for being so reckless and jumping into the fray, however heroic it was. Bakugou was checked over, even at his swears and growls of being fine. As soon as he could get away, he followed Midoriya down the road. "Deku!" he called, making the other stop and turn around. "Hey Kakken, are you OMMF?" Midoriya was cut off by lips pressing against his. Bakugou towered over him, gently holding his face up by his chin as he kissed him. He could always tell when Midoriya liked something, so he had taken into some studying of his own. When he'd been pushed into Midoriya, he'd noticed how the other had enjoyed it. When he finally broke away, he realized he'd pushed Midoriya against a wall and let him go. "Think of it as a thank you, shitty nerd," he growled, backing up and starting to walk off. "I don't owe you anything." Once Bakugou was out of sight, Midoriya quickly covered his mouth, a bright pink blush on his face. He squealed happily, carrying on his walk home. Except, "Midoriya, my boy." All Might came bursting round the corner, scaring Midoriya and making him scream. All Might laughed heartily, patting Midoriya's shoulder in a good-natured way. All Might. What are you doing here? I'm here to praise you. Praise you for your 𝗧𝗵𝗲 was coughed up, making Midoriya scream again and back up. Wisps of steam escaped from All Might, shrouding Midoriya's vision. There was an audible popping sound and the mist cleared to reveal. Who are you? Wait, don't tell me, All Might. In the place of All Might there stood a shorter, skinnier man with a long face and blonde, scraggy hair. He held up his hands in a surrender. Yep. Usually, I wouldn't show my true form in front of ordinary citizens, by today you are the exception. And then went on the conversation that had happened on the roof, minus the question Midoriya asked. All Might explained the quirk one for all to a wide-eyed Midoriya, everything from how it's been passed down to what actually happens. Why are you telling me all of this? Because I believe you should be the next bearer. Of course, it's completely optional and you'd have to work hard to get your body in shape, but I'm sure that I'll do it. Midoriya's face lit up. Was this real? Was he going to get a quirk? A proper quirk. Not only a quirk, but a quirk from All Might. It sounded too good to be true. Oh thank God. It would be pretty awkward if you said no. All Might coughed, then stood tall, staring down at Midoriya. Young Midoriya, if you can train to mold the right body shape for this power, then you can become a hero. Midoriya dropped to his knees, starting to cry. He couldn't help it, but they weren't tears as sadness. He kept repeating, thank you. I'll train. I'll make you proud. Over and over again. All Might smiled at him, taking in how weak the green-haired boy looked. I had the opportunity to choose that young Bakugou boy. I could have chosen anyone. But I can still make a hero out of this child, however weak he looks. He has the spirit of a hero and sometimes that's all that there needs to be. School the next day was a drag. Midoriya and Bakugou were all over the news because of what had happened and how All Might had shown up. All their classmates were asking what had happened, even though they'd gotten it from the news, and if they were okay. Naturally, Midoriya was fine with only a few scratches while Bakugou had a horrible cough and cuts all over him. Every time Midoriya would look over at him, the shorter boy would blush at the memory of the thank you Bakugou had given him. Bakugou would notice and smirk at him, creating a V with his fingers and sticking them around his tongue to tease him. This made Midoriya blush and instantly look away. This carried on until the end of the day. By then Midoriya was a flustered mess as he'd started to walk home. He had a smile on his face up until, "Hey, gay freak." The voice was mocking behind him, making him stop in his tracks. A group of Bakugou's friends, including a frowning Bakugou, walked over to him. Midoriya was trembling a little, his eyes wide. Bakugou told them. He shot an accusing glance at Bakugou, feeling numb when the other only looked away in what? Shame. Guilt. Midoriya didn't know. He honestly didn't care. He started backing up, trying to get away from the bullies who just laughed and followed him, throwing more criticizing insults at him. 282 Bakugou couldn't look at Midoriya after he'd been so happy moments before. When talking to his friends about everything with the sludge villain, Bakugou had been pretty open about Midoriya attempting to save him. Obviously though, he didn't include the fact that he had kissed Midoriya. He accidentally slipped that Midoriya was gay and instantly regretted it, trying to backtrack. Before he knew it, his friends were laughing and throwing homophobic insults at Midoriya, who had tripped and was just curled up on the floor. He stood to the side, pretending to laugh at Midoriya while inwardly cursing. He wanted to beat up his friends for being so horrible, but he knew he'd just get called a hypocrite. If you can't beat them, join them. 215 Midoriya cried into his knees as his classmates yelled at him, using their quirks against him. He felt a blast sent straight at him and was flung back, his hair becoming even messier. Ahead of him, Bakugou had his arm outstretched at him. He'd fired one of his explosions at Midoriya. Okay, losers. The nerd looks beat up enough. He growled to his friends, who just shrugged. The one who had called out to Midoriya and called him a gay freak kicked the smaller boy and turned, laughing as he led the others away. Bakugou didn't go with them. He waited until they were out of sight before turning to Midoriya and holding out his hand to help the other stand. Midoriya flinched when Bakugou came close and curled up in a little ball, crying quietly. 𝗬𝗧𝗍. Kacchan. His voice was quiet and broken. Why did you tell them? You know how people are in this school. I thought I could trust you to keep it to yourself. Bakugou didn't reply. He pulled Midoriya up and stared him in the eyes. You thought wrong. I told you that I don't owe you anything, so I don't owe it to you to keep that a secret. He didn't want to say it, but he did. Immediately after speaking, he regretted it but didn't let it show. Midoriya's eyes shone with new tears as he backed away from Bakugou, pure betrayal and sadness clouding his gaze. I guess it really was all a lie, he murmured. Bakugou finally snapped back to the reality of what was happening and tried to reach out to Midoriya, but he was too late. The short green-haired boy had already turned and ran, tears streaming down his cheeks. Midoriya flung himself onto his bed, holding his pillow close and sobbing loudly. Bakugou had ran after him and he'd closed the door in the blonde's face. He was angry and confused at why Bakugou hated him so much, but sadness was the main emotion. He felt so betrayed he only felt numb. Bakugou stayed at his door, knocking loudly and calling to him. At the same time he was texting Midoriya, spamming him with apologies and begs to come downstairs. Midoriya had left every message on read. God damn it. I'm so stupid. Bakugou yelled to himself, slamming his dust against the door and leaning his head on it sadly. The door unlocked and Bakugou fell forward, right onto Midoriya, who squeaked and toppled over. Now it stood as Bakugou laying over Midoriya, both blushing. Yeah. You are, Kacchan. The green boy murmured, gently pushing him off. Bakugou stood up, pulling Midoriya up with him. I really am. Bakugou nodded, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. Look Deku, I'm really not good at the whole apology thing since I just get all cheesy and cringe at myself, so the best I can say is, I'm really sorry. I was explaining what happened with 𝗵𝗲 and it just kinda slipped out. Midoriya nodded, holding one of his arms and looking down. It's okay. I guess. It's not like getting bullied is something new to me. What hurt the most was the fact that you told them. He looked up at Bakugou. I know you hate me for whatever reason you have, but I didn't think you'd tell them something like that. Bakugou sighed, looking away. I'm also sorry for joining in with them. Now this surprised Midoriya. I know, right, shocker for me to say that. But that was the time I regretted it. I honestly have no excuse for joining in with them. This time, it hurt me too. And before either knew what was happening, Midoriya had leapt forward and locked Bakugou in a tight hug. It's okay. I forgive you. I always forgive you because I know you're really like this. You're sweet, Kacchan. Midoriya mumbled against him, though his words were still audible. Thank you for apologizing, it really means a lot. And there it was, Midoriya's shining smile. For once, Bakugou couldn't help but smile and hug him back. So, we're cool. We're cool. Just don't join in with them again about this matter. Of course not. I'll beat the CRP out of anyone who does. Promise. Promise. And so the two ended up on Midoriya's sofa, re-watching old All Might videos together like they had as kids. Midoriya had fallen asleep, cuddled against Bakugou. He hadn't dozed off like that, but as he shuffled closer, Bakugou hadn't pushed him off. He wrapped one arm around Midoriya and looked away, the usual scowl on his face. Eventually though, he too fell asleep, his head resting on Midoriya's messy hair. He nuzzled him softly because of how surprisingly soft Midoriya's hair was. Inko returned home to see the two boys curled up asleep. She had merely smiled and gone to her room, shaking her head a little and laughing to herself. 2:41 the next day came and Bakugou had been the first one to wake up and blushed softly as he saw Midoriya, peacefully sleeping against him. He didn't want to, as the sleeping position was comfortable, but he had to gently shake the green-haired boy awake. Hey! Deku! We have school, get up. These words jolted Midoriya awake. He squeaked and fell off the sofa, making Bakugou raise his arms in an almost surrender. He smirked at Midoriya and stood up, dusting himself down. Come on nerd, you don't want to be late, do you? Bakugou was practically ready, he just needed to grab his backpack on the way down to school. Midoriya blushed, starting to go around the house and collect his things frantically. Bakugou leant against a wall, watching him as he went. Cute. A bit. Bakugou thought, then blushed at his own thoughts. Luckily, Midoriya was too busy getting his stuff to see Bakugou's bright red cheeks. Once the both of them were ready, they left the house and quickly ran to Bakugou's to collect the other's backpack. Once that was gotten, Bakugou looked at his watch. SHT. We're going to be late. He looked back at Midoriya and had an idea. Actually, he picked Midoriya up, earning a protesting squeak before he realized what Bakugou was doing and obliged. Bakugou moved Midoriya to his back and started running, holding his thighs as a piggyback. Midoriya had his arms wrapped around Bakugou's neck and the tallest bag slumped over his back as he ran along. Neither had spoken about falling asleep together because they were both embarrassed about secretly enjoying it. Bakugou was trying to deny it though. Finally they made it to school, just in time. So no one suspected anything. Bakugou dropped Midoriya off outside and took his bag back, smiling slightly at him. I didn't realize you were so light, Deku. He chuckled, walking into school with Midoriya by his side. The two talked all the way to lesson, in which they were fashionably late. When Bakugou walked through, no one said anything. When Midoriya walked through, a few people snickered. Midoriya looked down, averting his gaze from everyone as he took his seat. He heard whispering from beside him and sighed until he heard some scooting around. Suddenly, Bakugou was seated at the desk beside him. He had swapped with one of his friends, saying he'd do it to annoy Deku or something. Honestly, it was to stop others bugging him. That didn't do much though, as on Midoriya's desk there lay a large piece of paper. He turned it over and the happiness drained from his face. Written in bold words in the middle was the word gay with more homophobic slurs surrounding it. Midoriya read them all. They ranged from FG to kill yourself. Midoriya read them all. Bakugou could see the green's hands trembling and his breathing starting to speed up. Midoriya read them all. He couldn't take it, shaking as he broke into tears. Bakugou was immediately at his side, picking him up and carrying him out of the room again to help him get stabilized. They were in there for quite a while, Bakugou using his phone to look up ways to help Midoriya. He ended up just reluctantly hugging Midoriya and tell him everything would be okay. Surprisingly, it had worked and Midoriya had calmed down a little, though his breathing was still uneven. Thanks Kakken. Midoriya murmured, holding his throat and rubbing it gently. Bakugou merely shrugged, looking out the window absent-mindedly. Yeah, no problem loser. The taller was reading something and Midoriya tilted his head, wobbling to his feet and looking over Bakugou's shoulder. It was the note. Bakugou saw his expression change and activated his quirk, blowing up the note in his hand. That's what I think of their stupid insults. He growled. Midoriya stared as the little pieces of paper fluttered down. Kakken. Midoriya stared up at him, eyes wide. You really are a hero. Bakugou looked away, a light blush on his cheeks. Whatever, nerd. Just get yourself back together. He grumbled, secretly enjoying the little compliment. Midoriya had said it so many times before, but now it felt special. It felt real. Bakugou draped one arm around Midoriya's shoulder, smiling as the other didn't flinch as much. Tell me if it happens again and I'll beat their sorry buttes. Midoriya blushed lightly, nodding with a small smile. He wiped his tears and moved closer to Bakugou, giving him a little hug of appreciation. He was surprised when the ash blonde hugged him back protectively. He wasn't complaining though. When they had returned to lesson, Bakugou was glaring at each of his friends warningly. His gaze said one thing pretty clearly: mess with Deku again and you won't be able to feel your face for weeks. And that shut up their mocking snickers. The teacher asked Midoriya if he was okay and the student nodded, smiling softly and writing something down. Once the teacher had his back turned, Midoriya slipped the little note over to Bakugou. 75 Bakugou smiled as he read the little note, looking over at Midoriya who was staring at the board, trying to catch up. 199 Bakugou smiled as he read the little note, looking over at Midoriya who was staring at the board, trying to catch up. He turned the note over and raised an eyebrow at what it said. He couldn't think of anything really, apart from more prescription notes and late passes. 4:35 He couldn't think of anything really, apart from more prescription notes and late passes. He thought about it for the entirety of the day until lunchtime. Bakugou's eyes narrowed angrily as he saw his friends follow Midoriya out the lunch hall. He felt his hands heating up as he silently followed them, staying hidden behind walls. Midoriya had gone outside and sat underneath a tree, doodling and writing in a notebook he had leaned against his knees. It was a warm day, which was perfect as Bakugou was sweating. He hid as he saw the group walk over to Midoriya, who was oblivious and mumbling to himself. Bakugou gritted his teeth as he heard Midoriya's squeak of surprise, then a thump noise as something hit the grass. Bakugou peeked around the corner and only saw red. Midoriya was curled up, clutching his eye and whimpering quietly. Something was different though, something that held Bakugou back from pouncing just yet. Midoriya rose to his feet, glaring at the bullies with one eye closed. Just you wait. One day, I'll be the one giving black eyes to 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏 like you. I can be a hero, you'll see. This shocked Bakugou, as he'd never heard Midoriya stand up for himself like that. The bullies just laughed and kneed Midoriya in the stomach, making him groan softly in pain and hold his stomach. That set Bakugou off and he came running round the corner, his quirk fully ready. He took aim and fired, hitting the center of the group and sending them sprawling back. He'd managed to get to Midoriya in time and block him from the blast, now standing in between him and those who had hurt him. Bakugou glared at them, his hand sparking. Back the F off. You've done enough. No one bullies Deku but me. He snarled, making the bullies back off a little out of fear. You come anywhere near him again and I'll send you to Italy in an explosive fiery ball of death. Now F off. At his last words, they all scrambled away, looking over their shoulders as they ran. Bakugou's angry figure made them run faster. When they were gone, Bakugou turned and crouched in front of Midoriya, who was curled up and covering his eye again. Hey, it's me. He gently pulled Midoriya's hand down and held his cheek, staring at a now badly bruised eye. They did a real number on you. I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner. I heard what you said though and I'm really impressed. Bakugou pulled him into a little hug, unsure of what else to do. You did really well, honest. Now let's get you back to normal, okay? No tears, I'm here. Bakugou pulled Midoriya up, who nodded with a brave smile through the pain. I'm here. Midoriya waved goodbye to Bakugou at the end of the day, smiling at the scowling boy who sheepishly returned the wave before going into his house. The messy-haired boy giggled, then started jogging towards the beach. That was where All Might had told him to meet when they'd made the deal after the sludge attack. Finally, Midoriya would be able to show how he truly was. He'd be a hero. He sped up his light jogging to a run, giddy with excitement and whooping loudly in anticipation. Once he skidded to a halt at the beach, his expression fell at the mountains of rubbish. All Might stood in a clearing-like area within the mountains of waste. It's a shame this beach is so jam-packed with rubbish. The trainer spoke, looking over his shoulder with a grin plastered on his face. But not a shame that you'll be here to fix it. And with those words, Midoriya's training began. 54 times skip to a few weeks later. Bakugou had been noticing little changes in Midoriya. How he'd keep on falling asleep in class, how he'd always look tired and how he'd become noticeably less weak. In his t-shirt the muscles in his arms had grown and Bakugou couldn't help but stare sometimes. He had no idea what was really happening, but he intended to find out. After class that afternoon, Bakugou walked back home with Midoriya. Once inside, he watched the green-haired boy through his window, waiting there until Midoriya left. He'd seen the other leaving his house at that time after school every day for a few good weeks now, so his curiosity just grew. The taller followed Midoriya secretly, all the way to the beach where he sat on a bench to overlook it. He watched as Midoriya ran towards a pile of old scrap metal, raising his eyebrow as he watched the figure try to push it along. Is this what he's been doing? Clearing the beach? He murmured to himself, jumping as he heard a voice behind him. Yes. Young Midoriya is doing an excellent job at it too. Bakugou turned around and stood up, his usual scowl back in place as he took in the figure before him. They were about the same height, he noticed. While he was rather compact and well-built at the age he was, the other was skinny with an oversized top hanging over his PP. It was all might, but Bakugou didn't know this. "Who are you? How do you know Deku?" Bakugou growled defensively, embarrassed he'd been caught talking to himself. "My name does not matter. I am Midoriya's trainer." "Who are you?" "Katsuki. His friend." Was that what they were? Friends? More or less. He added, glaring at the other. The unnamed figure walked past Bakugou and down to the beach where Midoriya was resting against the large object he'd managed to move. The two talked and the man pointed to another object to be moved. Bakugou didn't think he'd do it, but Midoriya nodded to the man determinedly and ran over, pushing his weight against the trash and starting to push it across the beach. It took some time, but Bakugou stayed for the entirety of it from the bench he sat on, watching in awe as the once weak Midoriya picked up heavy objects on his back with seemingly no effort. At one point the temperature rose too much and Midoriya probably got too sweaty, so the figure on the beach pulled off his shirt and carried on with his work. Even from way up where he was, Bakugou could see how much more his muscles had grown. He blushed softly and looked away, biting the inside of his cheek. 178 by sundown, Midoriya had cleared out a section and had waved goodbye to his trainer, starting to head back home tiredly. He hadn't expected to see Bakugou at the top and jumped as he spoke. "Sup loser? KacchanxDeku, what are you doing here?" Midoriya asked nervously, fidgeting with his hands. "I've come to help you. You look tired as SHT and probably won't be able to walk the rest of the way to your house." Midoriya looked down in defeat and the next thing he knew he was sitting on Bakugou's back being carried to his home in a piggyback. He smiled, resting his head against Bakugou's soft hair and inwardly squeaking from happiness as the other didn't pull away. Bakugou used Midoriya's keys to get into his house, the shorter boy peacefully resting on his back. He closed the door behind him with his foot and headed upstairs to Midoriya's dorky room. Once inside the room, he looked around as he walked to the other's bed, plopping him down and turning to leave again. Except he couldn't. Something tugged onto his jacket, stopping him from leaving. He looked over his shoulder at Midoriya, clutching his jacket to hold him still. "Sleep with me, Kakken," he murmured, clearly embarrassed and blushing profoundly. His grip on Bakugou didn't loosen though. "What? Why?" "I'm cold." "You're warm." "You're warm." Midoriya blushed even more, moving closer to Bakugou and leaning against his side. "Please." Bakugou let out a groan, but nodded and turned back around. He scooped Midoriya into his arms, earning a little squeak of protest that he chose to ignore, then laid on the bed and wrapped his arms around the shorter male. He blushed lightly as he felt Midoriya hug back, cuddling against him. He put on his scowl again to cover up his blush and just fiddled with Midoriya's messy hair, drawing his fingers through it smoothly and holding him close to keep him warm. Eventually, Midoriya did fall asleep as he had relaxed against Bakugou completely, giving into the warmth. Bakugou had made his hands warm up, not too much, just to keep Midoriya warm through the night. He too fell asleep, snuggled with him. 157 Izuku. "Get up, you're going to be late for school." The voice of Inko yelled from downstairs, waking Bakugou from his slumber. He looked around, confused at where he was for a moment before he realized he was hugging onto the warm body of Midoriya, who was also starting to wake up. Bakugou sat up, yawning and rubbing his eyes. Midoriya's face heated up as he stared at the other. "Oh, Kakken, why are you in my bed?" he asked, blushing madly. Bakugou just laughed, acting as if it wasn't making him blush too. "Because you asked me to, idiot." "Sleep with me, Kakken." He drew his face closer to Midoriya's, smirking as the other's blush grew. "I'm pretty sure you were going to say I'm hot. Tell me, Deku, do you think I'm hot?" Bakugou chuckled at how flustered the green-haired boy got. He didn't hear a denial. "Come on, you should get into your uniform. Also get a shirt please." Bakugou nodded to Midoriya, who looked down at his bare chest and squeaked in embarrassment. He tried to cover his chest with his hands, but Bakugou blocked his by holding his wrists. "Kakken, did I do this?" Bakugou looked up at Midoriya, crouching down to inspect some cuts and bruises. He knew he was flustering Midoriya as he was so close to his PP, but he didn't really care. At the moment he only cared about Midoriya's wounds. Deku, answer me. Did I do this? He placed one hand on an old burn mark near his hip and he saw Midoriya's face flush a deep red, then his head nod slowly. Bakugou sighed softly, looking down. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was hurting you so much. He stood up again, placing his hands on Midoriya's bare shoulders and heating them up. Midoriya flinched at first but soon relaxed. Against Bakugou kept him warm like that for a few more moments until Inko called for him again. 1:40 The two walked to school together, side by side. Bakugou kept glancing down at the other to make sure he was okay. Do you train every day? Is that why you've been so tired lately? He asked, holding Midoriya's backpack as he seemed so tired. Naturally, Midoriya had protested but Bakugou was firm and had carried it anyway. Yeah, it's to help me become a hero. I will, Kacchan. I'll do it. I'll become a hero. Bakugou smiled ever so slightly, giving Midoriya's bag back as they reached the school. Yeah. I know you will. About a week later, 57 Midoriya was over the moon, to say the least. His childhood crush was now being so much kinder and sweeter to him. He was training to become a hero and people had started bothering him less. That didn't mean it had stopped, but it was getting better. Also, it was getting anonymous. Midoriya couldn't figure out who was targeting him because they'd always do it in secret. He walked into school the next morning, noting that the bulletin board was always updated on Mondays, so he headed over. Midoriya smiled as he walked, feeling a lot brighter than he usually did. This was because they were ever nearing the time to apply for their high schools. He'd be trying for UA. As he neared the board, his face fell though. Stabbed against the blue board with a safety pin was the note he'd received that sent him into an attack, rewritten and with more words. Someone had done their research. He just stared at the note, obviously aimed at him, as a small group of people passed him. He'd be lying if he said he hadn't heard their scornful chuckles and mocking words. Midoriya tightened his grip of his backpack straps, shaking a little as he took down the note and walked to a bin. He ripped the note to shreds and threw it away. He was getting better at not taking people's SHT, at least. Visibly. Inwardly, it hurt him just as much as it usually did and he ended up crying behind the school until Bakugou found him and helped him up. Deku. Ignore those BSTRDS. They're just jealous. Jealous of what, Kacchan? Jealous of how I'm quirkless. Oh yeah, that sounds like something someone should be jealous of. Midoriya had cut him off and ran away, his face in his hands. He hadn't noticed Bakugou's hand spark aggressively as he left. 266 times skipped to next day for the green-haired boy was walking home from school at last, side by side with Bakugou. They hadn't had a real conversation since Midoriya's little outburst and every time he tried to start one Bakugou would shut him down. He sighed, stopping at Bakugou's house and waving goodbye as he carried on back to his own. Once in the house, Midoriya started to read while lifting a weight. The exams for UA would be upon him soon, so he was training harder than ever. His muscles had become a little more noticeable because of the hours of training he did daily and he was growing more satisfied with it every day. His body needed to be in the perfect shape for when one for all would be passed on to him. He smiled as he thought of this and stood up, walking put the house. 51 Bakugou had decided to follow Midoriya down to the beach to watch him work again. He'd done this a few times, not always revealing himself. He sat on the same bench and watched as Midoriya took off his short and started lifting heavy objects and throwing them away. The beach had become a lot less trashy because of Midoriya's training and that made Bakugou chuckle softly. Same old Deku. Training for himself while simultaneously helping others. He shook his head gently, watching the other figure on the beach work away with little to no effort. Bakugou blushed softly as he realized he was keeping his focus on Midoriya's chest and quickly looked away, his scowl deepening. Will all this hard work be for nothing though? That was the only thing bothering him. Whether Midoriya would even get into UA after all of this. Months passed and the UA entrance exam was finally upon them. Midoriya excitedly skipped along with Bakugou, staying beside him the entire walk there, buzzing with anticipation. Once in the grounds, Midoriya took Bakugou's hand and pulled him along, not wanting to wait another moment. He saw Bakugou blush and roll with it, so he giggled, making the other's eyes roll with a smile. Come on, Kacchan. We can't be late. 35 Bakugou smiled at Midoriya's enthusiasm and went along with it, though wasn't as attention-drawing. He allowed himself to be dragged along by the shorter male as they entered the large building and took a seat next to each other. Midoriya was muttering to himself as present 𝗵𝗃, a tall, slender man with long, spiky blonde hair and a small mustache, explained what the practical test would be. Bakugou was about to nudge him to get him to stop when someone else beat him to it. A boy near the front stood up with his hand raised and started complaining about something to do with the robots. This introduced a no-pointer one that Bakugou kept in mind to ignore given the score it held. The boy near the front didn't finish there though. And you. There. Boy with the green hair. He felt Midoriya tense up beside him. Stop muttering to yourself. It's irritating for those around you who are trying to listen. That will be all, thank you. Then the boy sat back down again like nothing happened. Bakugou wanted to tell at him to leave Deku alone, but he stopped himself. Midoriya seemed lost in his thoughts, so Bakugou heated up a finger and poked him with it, jolting the other back to his senses so they could listen to the end of present 𝗵𝗃's speech. They'd all be assigned areas and Bakugou smiled more as he saw he was in the same one as Midoriya. He could protect him that way. He saw Midoriya talking to a brunette a little away from him and a pang of jealousy hit him, but he had no idea why. Bakugou sauntered over to them, scowling lightly with a raised eyebrow. Deku. Who's this beach? He roughly pointed his thumb at the pink-cheeked girl, who frowned at him angrily. Kacchan. Don't be so rude. This is 𝗬𝗓𝗏, my new friend. I'm his new friend. Who are you, hedgehog head? 𝗬𝗓𝗏 put her hands on her hips, tapping her foot impatiently. The one and only Bakugou. All you extras are going down. Bakugou scorned, grinning as the girl started to fume a little at being called an extra. I make the exception for Deku. Given the circumstances. The circumstances of Midoriya being quirkless, that was. Midoriya laughed softly, making Bakugou's heart beat faster. He hadn't realized how sweet to the ears that laugh was. 108 Everyone get ready. The practical exam is starting in 3, 2, 1. Begin. 30 A loudspeaker hollered above them as the doors were swung wide open. The crowds of different people, each with their own unique quirk, ran into the facility. This was it. Their opportunity to get a place in the best hero course in the world. Midoriya remembered nothing but intense pain. His eyes slowly blinked open as he sat up in her infirmary bed, rubbing his head with a light groan of pain. He felt movement near his feet and wasn't even able to focus on his surroundings before a pair of strong arms enveloped him in a hug. Deku, are you okay? You broke one of your arms and both of your legs. It was a pretty high fall. You're such an idiot. The concerned voice was matched with Bakugou's and that surprised Midoriya. Kacchan. What are you doing here? Yeah, what are you doing here, hedgehog head? A new voice sounded from the doorway as 𝗬𝗓𝗏 walked in, quickly running to Midoriya's side and hugging him once Bakugou let go. You saved me, Midoriya. Thank you. She squealed happily, earning an annoyed growl from Bakugou. Deku, what the F were you thinking? I know you've been training and all that SHT, but you went for the massive robot guy. Really? Bakugou rolled his eyes a little, shaking his head. 𝗬𝗓𝗏 turned on him. You're just jealous his quirk is so much cooler than yours. She glared at him, actually throwing Bakugou off for a moment. What? The F world are you on? Deku is quirkless. He looked over at Midoriya questioningly, for once not looking so certain, right? Midoriya just looked away, shrugging a little. Deku. Bakugou's tone was scarily soft. Do you or do you not have a quirk? There was silence for a moment. I do. A sudden loud bang and a spark erupted from Bakugou's hand as he stood up, pushing his chair back. His crimson eyes were narrowed as he glared down at the green-haired boy in the recovery bed. You. Lying. beebxtvh. He yelled, provoking 𝗬𝗓𝗏 to stand up and gently pat his shoulder. Bakugou started to float, spewing curses and insults at the both of them. Release. 𝗬𝗧𝗏 yelled, pulling her fingers apart and making Bakugou drop to the ground. The spiky-haired blonde huffed and stormed out of the room, fuming with rage. This was visible as there was steam physically burning off of him. Midoriya looked down once he left, feeling horrible for not telling Bakugou about his new quirk and making him feel so angry. He didn't look at 𝗬𝗏𝗏, who was staring at him curiously. "I'll see you around, Midoriya." She rubbed the back of her neck awkwardly and Midoriya nodded in a response. She hugged him one last time before leaving. Midoriya laid back with a sigh before he heard shoes tapping on the floor and stopping beside his bed. He looked up and saw an old woman with a hair bun and closed eyes. Hello. He stuttered, earning a chuckle from the old woman. "No need to be so formal. I'm Recovery Girl, I'm the one who healed you with my quirk. I've come to say you can go now, just take it easy on using one for all again." She raised her eyebrows, cutting Midoriya off from saying thank you and questioning how she knew. "All Might told me all about it. I saw how you did in the entrance exam, I have the footage now. You can take it home and assess it yourself." She brought out an old vis and smiled at him warmly. "Thank you, Recovery Girl." Midoriya smiled, giving her a little hug before standing up. Recovery Girl gave him a crutch to lean on as he left, waving goodbye. Midoriya smiled to himself as he limped out, starting to walk home. He limped over to Bakugou, who was just standing outside and staring at the sun. "Kacchan. I'm sorry shut the F up, do. If you're here to gloat, then don't. That beach showed me footage of your amazing quirk, and I don't really know what to feel about it. Why did you not tell me? Why did you make me think you were quirkless and weak? Why did you let me hurt you so much?" Midoriya was rendered speechless. Bakugou sniffed, turned and walked off. "See you maybe, Deku. Just so you know, you aren't an exception anymore." He wasn't an exception anymore. It had taken a week or so. In that time Bakugou hadn't replied to any of Midoriya's messages. Midoriya had resorted to using a ladder to climb up to Bakugou's window to talk to him. Granted, he'd nearly been pushed off, but things were a little more patched up between them. Bakugou hadn't really wanted to drag Midoriya into another panic attack, so he just grumbled responses. He'd even pulled Midoriya into his room so that he could play the footage of the entrance exam as Midoriya didn't have a VHS. It wasn't just the two of them, it was a mashup of everyone with their names and what their quirks were. It got to Bakugou's part and Midoriya grabbed into his arm, smiling widely. "You're so cool, Kacchan. I still think you're amazing." He beamed, making Bakugou flush ever so slightly and smirk a little. "I know I'm amazing. I guess you're pretty cool too." Die! 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 Screamed the Bakugou on screen, obliterating 3 different robots. Midoriya's eyes widened in amazement, feeling glad Bakugou hadn't been that violent towards him. "Awesome," he murmured, not seeing how Bakugou blushed deeper and looked away. 158 Bakugou rubbed his cheeks to try and get the pink out of them. Stupid Deku, getting him all soft. He grumbled to himself, stiffening a little as he saw the giant 0-pointer. He knew exactly what was coming next. That 𝗬𝗏𝗏 beach was stuck underneath a pile of stones, unable to get out as the robot drew closer. He watched as Midoriya saw himself run forward and take a jump, shooting into the air and punching the robot back, destroying it completely. Then played a few other people finishing off the last robots and the video was over. The 2 boys sat in silence before Midoriya spoke up. "Kacchan. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. My quirk manifested late and I wanted to surprise you by getting into you like I said I would. Then I'd show you and you'd think it was pretty cool." He heard nervous laughter beside him and shuffling around. "Saying it now, it sounds really stupid. I never meant to offend you or make you upset. I wanted you and I to be friends." Bakugou narrowed his eyes, not at the subject, but at how forced the word friend had sounded. He felt his heart pace quicken a little, like it usually did when Midoriya called him by the childhood nickname. "Kacchan. We're good?" Bakugou nodded, letting a small smile slip through. Midoriya caught the smile and returned it, relief shining in 𝗵𝗲𝗏's eyes that they were back on speaking grounds. He opened his mouth to say something when a voice sounded from below the window. "Aizu. Come down, your letter arrived." Inko called up to him excitedly, waving around a square envelope. Bakugou had received his acceptance letter the day before, so he smiled encouragingly at Midoriya as he waved goodbye and climbed down the ladder. Once Midoriya was down, he thought about how much effort the green-haired boy had put into talking to him, even though it was obvious he was being ignored. He chuckled softly to himself, leaning on his hand and staring at his TV screen boredly. 15 minutes passed and his phone started ringing beside him. Without even reading the caller ID, Bakugou picked up. Hello _oh my goodness I got an. Can you believe it? I can't. Oh my god. Wait, you actually got into UA? Yes. I did. Good job, Deku. You really turned the tables there. Thank you Kacchan. I'll see you at school. I'll see you tomorrow. His only response was a happy squeal down the other end of the line. Side by side, step by step, the two boys walked towards their new high school. Class 1A hero course, right? Midoriya kept repeating until Bakugou eventually ended up lightly hitting him over the head to shut him up. For the 20th time, yes. We're here now. Come on, don't make me look stupid. Bakugou rolled his eyes as they walked into the ground together. Was going well until Midoriya was so lost in his thoughts that he missed his footing and tripped over. In a flash, Bakugou was there to hold him up, scowling at him like normal. I said don't make me look like an idiot. That's the complete opposite. Though he looked annoyed, his crimson eyes were shining with amusement. The two carried on into the large building together, Midoriya reading each class aloud as Bakugou hadn't told him to shut up yet. They saw the class and Bakugou stopped Midoriya, pinning him against the wall. Okay Deku, in this class, I'll be tops of all these extras, alright? Not even you will stop me from being the best. He smirked, seeing how Midoriya had gotten flustered and pulled back, walking towards the classroom. He heard a scuffle of footsteps and Midoriya was back at his side. Okay, Kacchan. As long as you don't. Spill it again. Bakugou looked down at Midoriya as he spoke, shaking his head softly. Don't worry. I won't make that mistake twice. He grinned reassuringly and opened the door to the classroom, walking in. He had planted a scowl on his face as he sauntered in, Midoriya anxiously following in behind him. Bakugou's eyes scanned around the room, taking in the different characters he saw. He remembered a few of them from the entrance exam and took a seat that was free. He leaned back on his chair, his feet on the desk. Hey 𝗧𝗵𝗲. I saw you in the entrance exam. A hand slammed on Bakugou's desk, making him open one eye. He looked up at a shitty red-haired boy with a wide grin on his face. Name's Kirishima. Hero Kirishima. What's yours? Bakugou. Katsuki Bakugou. Kacchan. Kacchan. No, it's Bakugou to you, shitty hair. Bakugou glared up at the boy, turning to look at Midoriya as he came over to him excitedly. What's up, Deku? I found Uraraka. She's in this class too. Midoriya motioned to his friend, who flipped Bakugou off and went back to talking to a tall bluish-haired boy. And he saw Kirishima and squeaked uncertainly, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were busy. He laughed nervously and started shuffling away. I'll talk to you later, Kacchan. Midoriya then went back over to his new friend, the stab of jealousy piercing Bakugou yet again. So, is your name Bakugou or Kacchan? Shitty hair Kirishima asked him, tilting his head. Bakugou. It's Bakugou. The Midoriya, even, calls me that because of some stupid childhood nickname. Bakugou explained, waving his hand to dismiss the matter. Kirishima nodded, standing up straight. Well, let's go meet our classmates, Baku bro. Never call me that again. Whatever, come on. You gotta meet Kaminari, he's a real shocker. Kirishima laughed at his own joke while Bakugou narrowed his eyes and stood up. He knew from the entrance exam that Denki Kaminari had an electricity quirk. 215 Okay class, once you've all finished introducing yourselves to each other, sit down. The entirety of the new 1A class jumped, not even noticing a caterpillar, walking into their classroom and sitting at the teacher's desk. All the students shuffled to their seats, familiar with names and quirks now. I am Mr. Izuku, your homeroom teacher. Mr. Izuku introduced himself, unzipping the sleeping bag and stepping out. He stared around at his new class, his gaze landing on the boy behind the Bakugou child for a moment longer than anyone else. He wasn't as well-built and compact as the others that had wielded one for all, Izuku noted, though knew the boy was something special. Or was going to be. It had only been a week, but Midoriya had broken all his fingers twice. He was frequently in and out of the infirmary, usually being accompanied by 𝗫𝗫𝗍𝗓, the boy who had called him out in the entrance exam but he'd later became friends with Uraraka or Boku. Midoriya had been pleasantly surprised by Bakugou's sudden change of heart. While there was still the good old Bakugou in there, he had noticeably softened more towards Midoriya. He didn't want to say anything, but it had started to bug Midoriya how he was no longer an exception to Bakugou's competitive wrath. He shrugged it off as he stared up at the male who was walking him to the infirmary. Slow down on your quirk a little, recovery girl won't be able to keep up. I know you can't control it because it's late, but geez. Bakugou chewed him out the whole way there, stopping and blushing when Midoriya merely giggled. He grumbled to himself and carried on walking to the recovery bay. Ah yes, the late manifestation of his quirk. It had been an on-the-spot excuse and it had hurt Midoriya to lie, but as Bakugou believed him, he thought it would be okay. He was shielding him from the truth that would surely ruin any friendship they had. He sighed and just stared up at Bakugou fondly, his gay crush still madly overtaking his other feelings. He could sense it and so could Bakugou. A warm feeling when they were together. A warmth that flooded through their veins and made them happy. He giggled softly again, drawing attention to himself and realizing, too late, Bakugou had caught him staring at him and their eyes met. The roughness and aggressiveness that usually clouded Bakugou's crimson gaze was gone, replaced by a soft resting face. He tilted his head, his scowl being wiped off his face and a smirk to appear. Take a photo, it will last longer. He chuckled, raising an eyebrow as he saw Midoriya pull his phone out slowly. He laughed easily, I'll just send you one after school. Come on, let's get you to recovery girl. He rolled his eyes as he picked the shorter green-haired boy up so that he could get there faster. 289 Bakugou heard a tiny squeak from Midoriya as he was picked up, making his heart do a somersault in his chest at how cute the noise sounded. He stared at Midoriya, half wanting him to make the noise again. It was music to his ears as he found it adorable. Heck, he found all of Midoriya's little noises adorable. At last, they made it to the medical bay and Bakugou had to wait outside for Midoriya to be healed. It wasn't that long and Bakugou only played on his phone anyway, but when Midoriya came out fully healed he smiled and half-hugged him with one arm. He grinned at the shorter male. Better. Let's get back to lesson. Midoriya beamed up at him, holding his hand and starting to drag him back to their lesson. He could feel his heart pumping quicker at the close contact and blushed, seeing Midoriya's face flush a red color. Oh my god, he's adorable. Bakugou murmured under his voice, unaware Midoriya had heard it and was blushing more. You think I'm adorable? He asked, stopping outside a bathroom and looking up at Bakugou with wide eyes. For once, Bakugou was flustered. No. I was talking about someone else in this corridor. It sounded more like a question, so that was suspicious on its own, but Midoriya was quick to point out they were the only ones in the entire corridor. Izuku thought, biting his lip as he tried to think of an escape this time round. So there they stood, facing each other until Bakugou finally gave in under Midoriya's curious stare. Yes, shitty nerd. I did say you were cute. Got a problem with that? He saw Midoriya's eyes widen and his face flush a bright red. The boy let out a small giggle that made Bakugou's legs feel like jelly. Not at all, Kacchan. Not at all. God damn it, that smile was amazing. Bakugou suddenly felt the urge to kiss him, though knew it would probably frighten Midoriya or make him run off, so he merely grumbled as a response. He stuffed his hands into his pockets to stop himself from getting too touchy-feely, as he couldn't trust himself. Whatever. Let's just get back to -177 ding 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 51. The bell to signify the end of the day resounded around the empty corridors, cutting Bakugou off. Midoriya nodded though, understanding what he meant. Come on, Kacchan. We need to grab our bags. he squeaked, taking Bakugou's hand and skipping back to their classroom. Bakugou's face heated up into a blush as he felt Midoriya's hand laced with his and a goofy grin was on his face. Yeah. Lead the way, idiot. He couldn't hide the affection in his tone like he could his blush. He could see the other's ears turning a little pink and he inwardly swore. They carried on until they reached the classroom, walking to their seats and grabbing their bags. Once gotten, the two walked back outside together and out of the building, heading in their direction. Bakugou glanced over his shoulder, his scowl softening a little as he saw how tired Midoriya was from all that healing. Without warning, he plucked Midoriya off the ground and gave him a piggyback ride. You looked like your legs were about to give way. Bakugou snapped at the other's squeaks of protest that eventually did die down. Your hair smells nice. And it's soft. Midoriya spoke, a little muffled by Bakugou's hair. The taller blonde blushed a little, squeezing Midoriya's thighs in the process. He held Midoriya on his back the entire walk home, not complaining once and only marveling at how thick degree he seemed to be. Once at Midoriya's house, Bakugou dropped him off and waved goodbye, slinging his backpack over his shoulder and walking over to his house. As much as he hated it, he couldn't stop the smile spreading across his face. 304 short and sweet here, mainly just showing Mr. 𝗧𝗪 being Mr. 𝗧𝗪. Bakugou didn't really want to move. Or get up. Or do really anything. He laid in bed, relishing the fact it was a Saturday and he didn't need to do anything. That is, until he received a text that made his phone buzz on the counter beside him. He groaned as he rolled over, picking up the phone and turning it on. He saw 3 messages from Midoriya and unlocked his phone to read them. 18 cent 9:45 a.m. Deku, hey Kacchan. Sorry, you're probably still asleep, but I just wanted to know if you wanted to go to that little cafe down the road. Read sent 9:46 a.m. Deku, sorry, that sounded like a date. Now I'm thinking about it, you probably don't want to go. I shouldn't have said that. Read 7 cent 9:50 a.m. Deku, sorry for bothering you. Read quickly. Bakugou tapped out his response. 2 cent 10:01 a.m. Kacchan, no I'll go. It can be a date if you want it to be one. Read 2:18. He said nothing at how quickly Midoriya had read his message. He saw the 3 dots appear on the screen as the other typed out a reply. Sent 10:03 a.m. Deku, then. Will you go out with me, Kacchan? Read 2:14. Bakugou took a deep breath, imagining Midoriya's cheeks heating up as he waited for his reaction. He felt his own cheeks burning as he hit send. Sent 10:04 a.m. Kacchan, yes I will, Deku. The cafe at 11:45. Read 57. Sent 10:05 a.m. Deku, yep. See you then. Love. Read 182. Bakugou blushed deeper as he saw the little heart, a goofy smile on his face that he was glad his mother didn't see. He reluctantly threw his legs over the side of the bed and stood up, stretching his arms above his head with a large, drawn-out yawn. The hot-headed teen changed out of his boxers and into some comfortable clothes. He sat back on his bed once he was ready, having time to just wait. His finger hovered over Kirishima's number, wondering if he should tell his friend about the upcoming date. Bakugou decided against it though, as he'd promised Midoriya he wouldn't let things slip again. Looking down at the time on his phone, he decided to leave a little earlier to save a table for them. Bakugou left the house, not bothering to tell his mother where he was going. He walked down to the cafe and entered it, walking to one of the tables and checking the time again. 11:40 a.m. He chuckled softly, sitting back in his chair and staring at the door. A waitress came over and he told her he was waiting for someone. 11:45 a.m. No Deku. Bakugou frowned softly, about to leave as, 2 minutes later, Midoriya still wasn't there. Bakugou stood up, feeling that hint of hurt back when he saw Midoriya come rushing through the door, his hair a mess and his shoulder steaming. He saw Bakugou and his face lit up and he ran over to him. Before Bakugou could speak, he started squeaking. I'm so glad you're here. Sorry I'm late, I ran into some trouble on the way here. I'm fine though. You didn't have to wait too long, did you? He checked the time on his phone and sighed in relief. He didn't seem to notice the large cut on his cheek, but Bakugou did. He reached over the table and cupped Midoriya's cheek in his hand, his gaze softening ever so slightly. Trouble with who? he asked, whiling away some of the BLD with his thumb. Midoriya's face heated up with the contact as he didn't pull away, presumably enjoying the feeling. Deku. It was Todoroki. Midoriya blurted out with a purr at the gentle rubs, covering his mouth with a wide blush spreading over his face. Because of my connection with All Might. Wait, oh 𝗬𝗧𝗏 connection with All Might. You know what, I don't really care about that right now. Where's that 𝗵𝗃 he's going to pay for touching my Deku? He stopped once he realized what he'd said and heard a little giggle across the table from Midoriya. Kacchan. Don't worry about it, honest. I punched him into a bin anyway then ran for it. Bakugou's scowl left and a large grin replaced it. His own face was heating up as he sat back down again, chuckling. Now that's more like it. Tell me everything. 361 Midoriya explained everything that had happened when he'd left his house. Sh― Todoroki had caught up to him as he'd been making his way over to the cafe and had pinned him against the wall of an alleyway. Midoriya had tried to feebly crawl away from his grip, but to no avail. Todoroki had accused him of being all chummy with All Might and had said it was his mission to beat him. After all, Todoroki was the son of 𝗫𝗫𝗏, second greatest pro hero. Midoriya drew his fingers through his fluffy yet messy hair as he recounted the incident. He glanced up, seeing Bakugou's gaze was surprisingly soft. He went back to talking. And so, he burnt me. And froze me, then burnt me again. It hurt a lot. He sighed as he looked away again, so I punched him and got here as fast as I could. He managed a small smile. 309 that thing smile. It made Bakugou's heart melt every time he saw it, but this time he was able to push that feeling away. Instead, he leaned over the table and enveloped the smaller boy in a hug, which he gratefully returned. They stayed like that for a moment before Bakugou pulled back, cupping his cheeks in his hands. Well, that 𝗵𝗃 can go F himself. You shouldn't be treated like that. I know that's pretty rich coming from me, but even I don't hold grudges for the people you're buddy with. Mainly because I don't care unless they hurt you. He let Midoriya go as the waitress came back over and they ordered their food. Midoriya had a proper smile on now, shining brightly at Bakugou and making him want to hug him tightly and never let him go. Thanks, Kacchan. No problem. The only person getting to hurt my Deku is me. Bakugou bit his lip, realizing what he'd said, yet again. He chuckled softly at Midoriya's face, slowly rising into a reddish pink from his blush. Your Deku. He nodded, giggling softly as he did so. I like that. Midoriya suddenly purred, feeling something rubbing circles on his cheek. He closed his eyes at the comforting feeling, only opening one as he heard the familiar voice of Bakugou. My Deku, I think I found a weak spot. Bakugou's voice was light and playful as he practically abused the spot on Midoriya's cheek with his thumb. This carried on until Midoriya purred loudly, I love you. The both of them fell silent, their faces bright red. Repeat that. And no. It wasn't anything. Deku. Kacchan, you. I love you. The two of them just gazed at each other after that until Bakugou stood up. Wait. Kacchan, I'm sorry, 𝗎𝗏𝗏. He was cut off by Bakugou's lips pressing against his. Instantly, he melted into the warm kiss and kissed back. They broke apart when they needed air, breathing softly. Bakugou gently cupped Midoriya's cheeks and let a small smile slip. I think I love you too, my Deku. Monday arrived and Bakugou was crouched on the floor beside his bedside cabinet, picking up pieces on his alarm clock that he'd blown up. He threw them in the bin and made a mental note to buy himself a new one soon. The teen searched for his uniform, throwing it on quickly and leaving his tie behind like he always did. He rushed downstairs, his shoeless feet thumping against each step as his mother yelled at him to quieten down. He chose to ignore her and slid down the banister until he reached the floor, where he ran into the kitchen and put some bread in the toaster for a swift breakfast. Once it had popped, he'd stuffed it in his mouth and sat on a chair to pull his shoes on. He finished his toast and put on his shoes before grabbing his backpack, lightening his hair slightly, then running out the house without saying goodbye. He ran along the sidewalk, rubbing toast crumbs from his lips and grumbling about not brushing his teeth. He didn't have time though, as he was late as it was. Skidding round corners, UA was finally in his sights and he sped up to it. Bakugou burst through the doors to Class 1A, causing all heads to turn to him. Mr. Izuku glared at him, telling him to go to his seat before continuing what he was saying. Bakugou did so, leaning back on his chair to get a little closer to Midoriya sitting behind him. "Hey, Deku," he murmured once Izuku had his back turned. Midoriya's face instantly heated up and he stuttered a hello back, smiling at him. He chuckled lightly at the other's reaction and held up a finger for a pause sign as he reached into his bag. He ruffled around for a moment before pulling out a brand new notebook and offering it to Midoriya. "I noticed that other hero book you have is nearly full, so I got you this." He looked away as a little pink dusted his cheeks, smiling ever so slightly as Midoriya took the gift, squeaking happily. As Bakugou looked up, he saw Uraraka glaring at him suspiciously from across the classroom. He smirked triumphantly and stuck out his tongue, angering her and causing her to accidentally make her pencil float into the air. A few people snickered as she just muttered release to make it drop back down. 3:39 times skip 12. The end of the day was drawing nearer as Bakugou stared at the clock. The bell finally rang and all around the school chairs scuffed again the ground and feet shuffled down the halls. He stood up, dropping everything into his bag before slinging it over his shoulder. He turned around to talk to Midoriya, but saw he wasn't there. He frowned and walked out the classroom, trying to find him as he had an uneasy feeling in his gut. "Todoroki, please don't 𝗵𝗃. Bakugou looked up as he heard the voice, turning his head and walking down a corridor that was seemingly deserted. He rounded a corner and was met with Todoroki pinning Midoriya against the wall, forcing him into a kiss. Midoriya was trying to squirm away, clearly not enjoying it at all as he wasn't kissing back. Bakugou's eyes met his and all the taller blonde saw was a plea for help. That was all he needed. He ran forward, yelling curses as he punched Todoroki away from the smaller green-haired boy. He held Midoriya close to him protectively, glaring at the double-colored boy with obvious hostility. "What the F do you think you're doing?" Bakugou snarled, getting no response. His hand started sparking as he activated his quirk, but quickly stopped as he felt a soft hand hold his wrist back. "Kacchan. Don't, it's not worth it. I'm fine. Can we just leave please?" asked Midoriya in a small voice that instantly melted Bakugou's heart. "I guess," he grumbled, tightening his grip on the smaller boy as he snapped at the silent Todoroki. "You lay one finger on him again and you can bet your butt off I'll be killing you without hesitation." And with that, he picked Midoriya up on his back and stormed off. Wart 2K reads. TYSM. 66 Todoroki watched them walking off, the same blank expression on his face as he pulled up his phone and tapped on one of the contacts. Silence filled the corridor until there was a gruff greeting on the other side. "Father!" Todoroki returned, leaning against a wall and raising an eyebrow. "I did as you instructed but the plan was..." intervened. He heard a low growl on the other side and then the snapping and crackling of flames, imagining the area around his father now on fire. "Who? No one is going to stop this plan from working. Who is the little bastard?" Endeavor's voice rang in Todoroki's ears. "Katsuki Bakugou. He has known Midoriya since they were kids and came to protect him when I went through with what you told me to do." He clenched his fist, making a little ice run up his arm that his father wouldn't see. "Quirk. Explosion. I see. We can still work with this. Spend more time with that Midoriya boy, away from Bakugou, then lie about him. You will break this boy and you will become the #1 hero. Do I make myself clear?" Endeavor raised his voice at the last part. "Yes, father. Loud and clear. Good day." And Todoroki hung up, sighing as he placed his phone back in his pocket. His expression was blank and eyes were glassy, distant, almost. He turned and walked out of the school grounds. 296 back with Bakugou and Midoriya, they'd gone over to Bakugou's house to calm down and play some video games. Nothing had really happened between the two once they'd confessed except a little more affection. Baby steps, one might say. Bakugou was, for once, letting the other win secretly. "I win." Midoriya jumped up excitedly, dropping the remote and laughing. God, that smile. It made Bakugou's heart speed up so much he thought he'd explode. He chuckled lightly, pulling Midoriya back down and placing him on his lap comfortably. He'd found out Midoriya had enjoyed sitting on his lap, so he let him whenever. Yeah. Whatever. Bakugou chuckled, giving him back the remote. What do you want to play next? Midoriya leaned forward and looked through some of the games before picking one out and showing it to Bakugou. It was a driving game that was actually quite fun, though single player. This one. Okay, here, let me show you how to play. Bakugou's warm breath was hot against Midoriya's neck as he looked over the green-haired boy's shoulder. He wrapped his arms around him gently so he wouldn't slip off. All you need to do is drive with that joystick, jump with X, shoot with A and use objects with square. He pointed to each part on the remote in turn, pressing against Midoriya and making him blush. Got that. 121 yeah. Midoriya's flushed cheeks grew more prominent as Bakugou stared into his eyes. He found them mesmerizing. Wow. Your eyes are so. Wow. He breathed, just gazing at him. Midoriya gently cupped his cheeks, feeling them hot under his hands from Bakugou's blush. Oh my gosh, a little of 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗏. The shorter boy thought excitedly, his thoughts being jumbled up into a mess as he felt warm lips press against his yet again. He melted into it as he hugged onto Bakugou tightly, feeling strong arms wrap around him to hold him close. Once they'd broken the kiss, they just stared into each other's eyes. Tell no one. Agreed. And so their relationship grew even more. Over the weeks they went to school, Midoriya and Bakugou drew closer and closer, going on dates and stealing little kisses. Okay, it was mainly Bakugou who did the kissing and Midoriya getting flustered and giggling. They'd both decided to keep their newly found bond a secret from everyone, but that sure didn't stop people from teasingly shipping them. That would be Ashido and Kirishima. During hero training one day, they were partnered up. It was a pretty big assessment to see where all the students were up to, and it just so happened to be that Midoriya and Bakugou were partnered up. How cliché is this? Midoriya had chuckled as they went to the side to discuss tactics. They'd been put up against Todoroki and Yorozu, meaning they'd have to think more strategically. Midoriya knew Todoroki wouldn't be holding back after what he'd told Midoriya. Fut, you know you love me. Bakugou teased quietly, only for Midoriya to hear. He grinned and nodded. I can't lie there. How are we going to win this? Midoriya glanced over at his opponents, who were talking quietly. His gaze met Todoroki's for a second and he swore he could see the other smirk. Bakugou also saw this and wrapped his arm around Midoriya, pulling his attention back to the situation. I was thinking bait. I won't let him hurt you, though. Bakugou started to explain his plan, Midoriya's smile growing as he nodded along. Once Bakugou had finished, he clapped his hands together and beamed. That sounds perfect. Let's do that. Bakugou grinned, nodding in agreement. 84 times skipped to time of assessment 6. Midoriya stood side by side with Bakugou at the gate, a determined expression on his face. It surprised Bakugou how much stronger, mentally and physically, he had gotten over the past few months. He chuckled softly to himself, making the shorter look up at him in confusion. A loud voice echoed around the room they were in. Students, take your positions, the gates will be opening in 1 minute. Present MIC's voice rang around so loudly the boys were certain he was using his quirk instead of the speaker. They were already poised, ready for action with their quirks ready. Bakugou had been helping out Midoriya's training until the green-haired boy could use his quirk without too much of a backlash. A timer on the wall ticked down slowly, keeping them constantly aware of the 30 seconds they had left. Remember the plan? Of course I do, nerd. Bakugou smirked, looking down at Midoriya fondly. It's time to kick some butt. The shorter nodded, grinning as their heads snapped back to the gate that was starting to rise. 10, 9, 8, it was a quarter of the way up. 7, 6, 5, halfway. 4, 3, 2, 1. There was a pause as the gate reached the top, exposing the city they were to fight in. Silence dominated the surroundings until an A horn hooted, the timer flashed red and the shrill voice of Present 𝗵𝗃𝗏 screamed, Geo. Go. Go. And the boys were off. Deku. Take east. Midoriya nodded at his instructions, splitting off from Bakugou and running in the eastern direction. He pumped himself forward with his quirk, speeding him up until he had enough energy to jump. He rolled to land properly and leapt to his feet, looking around and nodding to himself as he realized he was on top of the building he needed to be at. He took a deep breath and crouched down, the power of one for all running through his veins. He counted to 3 in his head and, using his quirk, punched the air. 23 somewhere on the other side of the large stadium, filled with robots and the 4 students, Bakugou looked up. All 3 of them looked up, for all 3 of them noticed. Bakugou smirked. Somewhere close to Midoriya, Todoroki and Yorozu saw the punch. All 3 of them. No one could miss it, really. Momo, that's Midoriya. You know how much he damages himself when he uses his quirk, he'll be weakened. Now's our chance. He's probably fighting one of the robots. Todoroki told her. The other nodded, joining the double-colored boy towards Midoriya. Little did they know, they'd fallen right into Bakugou's plan, very neatly. 50 Midoriya was hidden snugly, silent and unmoving as he watched Todoroki and Yorozu ran towards where he was. A small smirk played on his lips, seeing how easily this was playing out. It might have been too easy. He just hoped Bakugou could do his part on time. He was just wondering how the hot-headed male could think up such a tactful plan so quickly when he heard Todoroki's voice. I'll freeze out the entire area so that he gets stuck. He can't have run away or we would have seen him. Can you make some sort of radar with your quirk? He asked Yorozu, who nodded and stood to the side to concentrate. Midoriya quickly had to remake the plan in his mind, powering up one for all in his hidey hole. He watched as Todoroki stepped forward, his side freezing up as it prepared itself for the large amount of ice it needed to produce. 3, he heard Todoroki murmur. 2, 1. Midoriya cut in with a yell, jumping up as high as he could right on cue as the duo-colored boy froze their surroundings. Midoriya focused on not letting the egg explode as he punched downwards, sending his opponents flying. He managed to land without damaging himself too much and fumbled with the walkie-talkie he'd been given. Kacchan. Ice had to tweak the plan a bit, but things should be relatively back to normal now. Fine. I'm nearly done with my part, keep them distracted for as long as you can and I'll be over ASAP. Bakugou's voice came crackling through the device. On it. We can do this, Kacchan. Whatever, SHT nerd. I just want to destroy that 𝗵𝗃 I'll see you soon. And with that, the line ended and Midoriya's pursuers were back on his tail. Even though he could more or less control the aftermath of pain from his quirk usage, it wouldn't hold out forever. So he started running. He was far enough ahead that he could run at his ordinary human pace, but was just trying to shake Todoroki and Yorozu off of his trail long enough for him to power up and take another large leap to blow them away. He took deep breaths as he rounded corners, zigzagging through streets and all the while trying to memorize the route in his head. Midoriya had to stop, however, at a dead end. He looked over his shoulder to see the 2 competitors closing in on him rather slowly. Oh, how much they didn't know they were helping him. Midoriya silently started to power up his quirk, keeping his back to them to make it seem like he was cowering in fear. He'd played them the fool. How laughable. Got you now, son of all might. He heard Todoroki purr. That was not laughable. Todoroki believed Midoriya was All Might's son as he'd made the connection that their quirks were similar. He tried to talk the karma out of believing it, but he couldn't. What? Confusion was laced in Yorozu's voice and she dropped her guard for just a second. Bingo! Midoriya whipped around and drew his fist back sharply. Boo-bye! Now it was Midoriya's turn to purr. He punched forward, every ounce of energy sending the 2 of them sprawling back against a wall. And that's when everything fell black. Wow, good job Bakugou. You followed your plan. Now Deku might be dead and so might you. 42 Bakugou's eyes snapped open. He had been messing with wires the entire time Midoriya had been distracting the opponents, trying to blow the wires up. He had done so, but the explosion had backfired and as all the power went out, he'd passed out. He was only out for a few moments before Midoriya's punch reached him, shocking him awake. He looked around to find himself in pitch darkness. Perfect. Bakugou stood up, clasping his hands together and getting himself fired up. He dropped his hands to his side and activated his quirk, though only a little. This was so he could fly without being spotted as easily, which is exactly what he did. Bakugou had to fly for a while before he was able to find Midoriya, Todoroki and Yorozu, all back on their feet. He noticed with a grimace that Midoriya seemed so worn out. "Don't worry, Deku. I'll save you," he thought determinedly. He landed and started to run silently, following the trail he'd seen from above until he'd finally reached where the 3 students were. 2 against 1 surely seemed unfair. Bakugou hid behind a wall, much like he had back at middle school. It seemed so far away now. He watched Midoriya limp forward, his hands balled into fists and his green eyes blazing. Goddammit Deku. Why did his eyes have to be so amazing? Bakugou shook his thoughts away and rubbed his hands together, causing friction and sweat. He'd altered the cables that controlled the electricity and had made the vicinity heat up too, so his quirk would always be ready. "Come along, Izuku. Come quietly and no one will get hurt." Todoroki seemed to be mocking Midoriya, knowing he had damaged himself too much to make another attack like that. A flame erupted in his hand, making Bakugou growl lowly as the area was lit up a little. Midoriya was hidden, silently watching. He caught Bakugou's eye and smirked softly, looking back down at Todoroki and Yorozu, who were looking for him. They seemed to have completely forgot about Bakugou. Big mistake. Bakugou sprang out of the shadows, barreling into Todoroki and pinning his against the wall. Sparks flew from his hand as he glared at the other, who was startled into silence. "Remember me, half-face," he snarled, bringing the small explosions close to Todoroki's face. The red and white panicked, his bicolored eyes widening as he tried to escape Bakugou's grasp to no avail. "Todoroki!" Yorozu kept repeating his name, stumbling in the darkness. "Todoro-dash!" Her voice was suddenly cut out as a shape jumped down, glowing as power ran through his veins. Midoriya had pounced on Yorozu and held her down, grinning brightly as he apologized to her. It seems to be that Todoroki and Yorozu have been stopped. Do they give in? Do they try to fight back? Who knows? Present MIC's voice rang around the arena and all eyes were on the scene. Midoriya's arm was damaged and fully charged, raised over Yorozu's head. Bakugou's explosions were right beside Todoroki's sweating face. "We give in." The light returned to the area and the 2 competitors were freed. Midoriya apologized a lot more to Yorozu as he helped her up. She laughed and waved it off as being okay and all for training anyway. She complimented him and he smiled, thanking her and returning it. Midoriya swayed a little on his feet, something Bakugou noticed. He dropped Todoroki and was running over to the shorter green-haired boy, panic rising in his stomach as he saw the other's face fall slowly. Midoriya's eyes rolled back into his head as he fell back, Bakugou screaming his name. 130. Thank you all so much for the reads, comments and votes. I read over every single comment and absolutely love them. Laughing face. 33 beep. 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 30. Bakugou's head slowly rose at movement from where he'd been resting. Midoriya had been taken to the infirmary and Bakugou had stubbornly threatened to blow people up if he wasn't allowed to go with him. Truthfully, Bakugou was ashamed and annoyed at himself he couldn't save Midoriya from getting hurt. If only he'd been faster. The figure sat up in bed and groaned softly in pain, holding his arm. Once realizing Bakugou was laying over his legs, he stuttered out, "Kacchan," with unmistakable happiness. Bakugou's features instantly melted into a smile as he hugged Midoriya. "You feeling better?" he asked, a little softer than usual. Midoriya nodded, blushing as the other played with his messy hair a little. 16. Kacchan. What time is it? Midoriya sat up and rubbed his eyes tiredly. During the assessment they had been put in their hero costumes, so the 2 boys were still in theirs. "Come on Deku, it's time you got into your normal clothes. The aftermath wasn't as bad as usual, so recovery girl fixed you up quickly. She told me you could leave anytime, so let's go to the changing rooms. I'm sweating like a pig in this." "Kacchan, sweating powers your quirk." Shut up, SHT nerd. Even the dumbest of people could hear the fondness in Bakugou's voice as he stood up, Midoriya following with a light giggle. The two boys walked over to the changing rooms, the shorter humming contentedly to himself as he kept stealing glances at Bakugou. Oh my god, hi so ho tandididen even mean for his quirk. Woyam even allowed to 𝗵𝗲𝗍𝗵𝗲 myheroacademia amazing dear lord. Midoriya thought he was thinking it and hadn't realized he'd been rambling out loud until Bakugou coughed against his hand softly. 155, who's the hottie you're on about? Bakugou asked, his tone pickling with annoyance. I swear, if it's that 50 to 50 twat I'm going to blow something up. Jealously ran through him as he thought of Todoroki and Midoriya together. He hated getting jealous, so he just wrapped one arm around Izuku and pulled him close, not looking down at him. They weren't properly going out, nor had they yet confessed, but it was obvious to the both of them how they felt. A strong bond of love. Naturally, Bakugou wanted to make sure that bond wasn't going to be broken anytime soon. 120 times skip to changing rooms, can that red-haired freak and Bolt Boy just leave already? They're making the atmosphere too gay already. That's my job. Bakugou thought, growling to himself as he sat on one of the benches, shirtless and holding his shirt in his hand. He kept noticing Midoriya would look over at him from time to time, and whenever their gazes met, it happened more often than you'd suspect. Bakugou would raise an eyebrow and smirk, stretching his arms to reveal the rest of his chest. This flustered Midoriya and made him get back to redressing. The two were both shirtless and halfway through putting on their uniform when the last person, Denki, left, pursuing Kirishima. Midoriya had no idea what was going on, but Bakugou had a plan. A plan that would make both of them happy. Midoriya had woken up first the next morning, a little confused at the warmth beside him until he realized it was Bakugou. Heat spread over his cheeks as he remembered the night before, but tried to play it cool and, inconspicuously, crawl under Bakugou's jumper to get closer to him. He huddled close to the tallest chest, holding his breath as he felt him move around a little. The way he was laying looked a tad odd, but Midoriya was more than comfortable as he snuggled against him. Dekuwhatif. Sorry Kakken. Midoriya squeaked, hiding in Bakugou's jumper. Whatever, shitnid. Bakugou growled, pulling him closer and nuzzling against his hair. What time is it? It's time for you two to get up and out of the house for a bit. Both boys looked up to see Inko standing over them with her hands on her hips. It was amusing to see her not at all surprised at the fact that Bakugou was curled around her son. She'd suspected that they'd end up together eventually. Bakugou's face heated up and he let Midoriya go, which he didn't seem too happy about. We'll be out soon. Thanks. Midoriya smiled up at her, watching as Inko walked out the room. Once she was gone, he turned to Bakugou and lightly kissed his cheek. The hot-headed teen didn't seem to like that though, and regret instantly stabbed Midoriya. That is, until Bakugou grabbed his face and pulled him closer, pressing their lips together roughly. He melted into the kiss, relieved Bakugou hadn't been angry. The kiss continued until the other gently pulled away, moving a strand of hair out of the green-haired boy's eyes. Come on, nerd. Your mother won't want us making out here much longer. Bakugou smirked, sitting up and waiting patiently for Midoriya to slip off his lap that he was sitting on. The smaller male did so, blushing tremendously. The two of them stood up, brushed themselves off and headed to the door. Bakugou teasingly held his arm out to the other. My lady, he laughed. Midoriya rolled his eyes, blushing and walking out with his boyfriend. 270. The two walked happily down the street, chatting while being completely oblivious to a pair of dim eyes, watching from an alleyway. The figure hiding followed them as they went on a little date, watching silently while mentally taking notes about how they acted towards each other. This is good information. Okay, class. We have your scores from that assessment we had on Friday. All Might addressed the class, a tired-looking Aizawa in his sleeping bag and a peppy-seeming present MIC joining him. The class cheered and Bakugou was smirking, knowing he and Midoriya had done well. You have been marked based on skill, technique, quirk usage, time and... All Might glanced at Aizawa, seemingly annoyed as Aizawa grinned and finished the list off. Damage done to your opponent. Remember, you had to think of them as a villain in that situation. The more damage conflicted, the better. Mr. Aizawa chuckled a little, unsettling class 1A a little. The scores were put up on the board and it went as followed: 14 first, Katsuki Bakugou and Izuku Midoriya second. 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗏 Tokoyami and Tsuyu third, 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 Todoroki and 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗏 fourth, Mizo Shoji and Toru Hagakure fifth, 𝗧𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗏 and Denki Kaminari sixth, 𝗬𝗏𝗃𝗃 Uraraka and Mina Ashido seventh, Tenya Ida and Masahiro Ojiro eighth, Minoru Mineta and Hanta Siro ninth, Kyoka Jiro and Koji Koda 10th, Rikido Soto and Yuga Amar 52 ha. Serves that thing half and half beebxtvh for trying to mess with Deku. The bird and the frog beat him. Admittedly, looking back at the footage, Zu and Tokoyami had done extremely well and their scores were only 1 or 2 off of first place's scores. Midoriya was squeaking happily at their score and shook Katsuki's shoulder to get his attention. The classmates who had seemed tensed up, thinking their hot-headed friend would blow Izuku to smithereens, and were quite surprised when Bakugou merely turned around and smiled. Kirishima practically spat out his drink at that. One person wasn't happy at all though, and turned away from them bitterly, going back to talking to another classmate quietly. 109 Midoriya grinned at Bakugou, praising him quietly so that no one else could hear what he was saying. "Your plan was amazing, Kacchan. I didn't think you could think up something so clever," he teased, making Bakugou scowl. It wasn't one of his usual scowls though, it was a little more affectionate. "Oi. I bloody well can make up a good plan. Look, I'm gonna make an absolutely amazing plan for our next day that I blow you up for calling me stupid." Bakugou quickly changed his choice with words as Kirishima walked up to them, grabbing Midoriya's collar and sparking up his hand to try and make his bullying a little more believable. Kirishima laughed and pulled his friend away. "Baku bro. Lay off Izuku for once, you did great. First place. That's what you get when you put two amazing future heroes on the same team." The redhead applauded the two, making Midoriya laugh and shake his head as Kirishima continued, "And Midoriya, your plan was amazing. I didn't even dash, it was Kacchan's idea, actually. I had to tweak it slightly, but it was all thanks to him we got the score we did." A hero whistled, clapping Bakugou on the back. 10 out of 10 there, mate. That was brilliant. He laughed, making Bakugou chuckle and lean back in his chair. "I know, I'm just a brilliant person." He smirked, catching Izuku's gaze for a split second and grinning properly at him. Midoriya smiled back, turning back to face the teacher as Mr. Aizawa clapped his hands. "Okay, now that's out of the way," he glared at All Might a little, who just smiled and waved, walking out of the classroom. Midoriya assumed it was too puff back to his normal form. "We can get to the actual lesson. Get into your gym clothes everyone. We're going outside." The rest of the day dragged on. The scores posted were the only things anyone could talk about. The end of the day came and Bakugou headed to the bathroom, telling Midoriya to wait by the door and he'd be out in a tick. So there the short boy stood, holding the straps of his backpack as he waited for his Kacchan patiently like a dog. He stood there calmly until there was a hot breath against his ear. "Gotcha." The word was quiet, yet the impact it had was momentous and triggered a chain of emotions to run through Izuku at once. First, he was confused at why the mystery person was saying it so close to him until he realized he was being dragged away. That caused him to panic and his energy to charge up, activating his quirk and making him mentally implode, which drained him and made him feel dizzy. He could feel his consciousness slipping away, just as he saw Bakugou walk out of the school doors and look for him, obviously confused. The two made eye contact for a split second before Midoriya's head dropped forward and darkness overwhelmed him. 72 The person who had caught him must have seen Bakugou too, as they swore under their breath and started to run. They could hear the blonde yelling at them and we're quite sure he was in hot pursuit. Bangs and sparks out of the corner of their eye determined this and also told them the other had used his quirk. "Well, hey. Stop. Give Deku back." The angry teen was chasing him down, firing up the explosions in his hands. The figure didn't stop or slow down as told to do so, though Bakugou could still catch up relatively easy as he was so fast. His red eyes blazed with rage, an expression he didn't usually wear as it tended to scare people. Especially children, Bakugou had noticed. They passed into the woodland area beside you, running as fast as their legs would take them. The figure was trying to outrun the taller, who was just moving himself forward with his quirk so that he wouldn't tire his legs too much. Bakugou used a burst of energy and shot himself forward until he was right beside the mystery figure, glaring at them and barreling into them so that they toppled over and dropped Midoriya. Bakugou was practically sitting on them, his hand was sweating and was exceptionally close to their face, as if he was threatening to blow their head up. Actually, that's exactly what he was doing. Todoroki, I didn't think you'd kidnap Deku. What an idiot, you should have known I'd protect him. The figure had their hood up still and was silent until there was a very faint voice. Speak up. Tell me why you tried to take him. The person was dazed and tired, seemingly. Bakugou was having none of it though, and he made his hand spark a little. Are you in love with him? Because that's just sick. Kidnapping him, 𝗧𝗵𝗲. What gave you the impression he'd want that? Spit it out. Release. Izuku. 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 Deku. The feminine-sounding voice kept repeating his name over and over again until he sat up, grumbling a little and rubbing his head. Uraraka. What happened? He suddenly remembered the kidnapping and started to shuffle away from her quickly. Where did Kacchan go? Uraraka looked away, not being able to meet his eye. I'm sorry, Deku. This is all my fault. He wiped her eyes, tears threatening to spill. Midoriya frowned at her, suspicion rising in his stomach. Uraraka. What have you done to Kacchan? I called the police on him. He's in the station, Deku. He might be put in prison. Silence. Then he started running. 82. I'm telling you, I'm innocent. Bakugou screeched, trying to rip away from the HNDCFFS that restrained him. He couldn't use his explosions, as he'd look not so innocent of what he was being accused of if he did. I didn't use my quirk against anyone. I hurt no one. He yelled, tugging and yanking at his hands. The police just exchanged glances. I, of all people, don't know why you'd think I'd hurt my boyfriend either. He glared daggers at the police, his eyes shining. The policist gave each other another look and leaned towards him, making him lean back. We have evidence witnesses that can all say you have used your quirk against Izuku Midoriya. They explain, we also understand you bully him. Bully him? No, I don't. I mean, I did when we were younger, but we're past that now. I would never hurt Izuku. 17. He could hear her. She was silently floating after him, but he knew he was being chased. Midoriya knew he was taking a risk by using his quirk, but he was going to take the chance anyway. He closed his eyes to concentrate before stopping and squatting. Deku. I knew you'd stop. I can explain. _whoosh. Midoriya had sprang into the air, the energy of one for all seeping through his legs. Once he was out of the woodland area, he continued running in the direction of the station. He begged to any god that existed for Bakugou to be okay and to not be sentenced to prison. 16. The police had leaned back in their chairs, eyeing Bakugou. We've also had word that you used your quirk on a girl called Uraraka. We don't know for certain though, as there are no witnesses. I did nothing to her. The only time I've used my quirk against her was in school assessments when I was assigned to. The police wrote something down after he spoke, then had a quiet discussion before turning to Bakugou. Sir, please tell us the number and name of your parent guardian so we can contact them. Until you're either paid out or someone can prove your innocence, we will be keeping you in custody. What? No thing, let me go. He squirmed in his HNDCFFS, but the action only made his wrists bleed a little. I'm sorry, sir. Will you at least tell me who called you to put me here? Bakugou glared at them as he was forced into one of the on-site cells. The police hesitated before nodding. We're not really supposed to tell you, but I guess we could, said one, while the other added at the end. It was a boy, in your class I think, called Shouto Todoroki. Izuku wasn't sure exactly when he passed out, but it happened. When he woke up, he didn't recognize his surroundings as he sat up, rubbing his head and scowling. He practically forced himself to remember what had happened before he'd lost consciousness and only half wanted to forget it ever happened. He had been practically flying through the air, his quirk boosting him along as he tried to reach the station. He'd lost 𝗬𝗧𝗏 quickly as she hadn't been able to activate her quirk in time to catch up. Izuku was perfectly happy with that. He didn't want to talk to her at that moment anyway. The power boost continued for a while until smash, he'd flown straight into something. This something with freezing to the touch and hard as rock. His head had hit against it, making a sickening cracking noise. All he could remember from then was the cold completely covering him and his vision fading to darkness. 24 Katsuki was, in a word, panicking. As usual though, he didn't let this show and replaced it with anger. That 𝗵𝗃 𝗵𝗃 talks bullshit. He's the one that tried hurting Deku, not me. Deku. The police seemed puzzled as they scribbled something down. Childhood nickname, that isn't the point though. Todoroki is lying, don't you see that? Do you have a lie detector here, or are you just going by his words? He has no proof. You have no proof. Without meaning to, his quirk blew the HNDCFFS off of his wrists. RSHT. The officer to the left flicked his hand, making the cuffs hover and a new pair to come flying in from the storage room. One officer Sugita quirk, levitation 23 officer Sugita glanced at his companion, who glared at Katsuki, but didn't move. If you want any chance of us believing a word you say, stay seated and listen carefully. He leaned forward, taking the HNDCFFS and restraining his hands again. There was a pause of silence before the second officer spoke. When was the last time you physically used your explosion quirk against Midoriya? Bakugou had his lips moving before he could comprehend the question. Sometime when we were in junior high. I stopped when we got to UA. The officer seemed satisfied, as if it was the first time he'd heard it. For Officer Kenjio quirk, truth speak 5, excuse us a moment, Katsuki. Sugita and Kenjio stood up, walking out of the interrogation room to talk among themselves. Bakugou finally let his worries out. And his panic show. Todoroki was behind this, so he had a sneaking suspicion why. What was it that Midoriya had said in that cafe? Because of my connection with All Might. Wait, Katsuki wasn't an idiot. He was starting to piece things together. Xiaoto was the son of the number 2 hero, Endeavor. Okay, he had that. Midoriya was closer to All Might than any other student, another thing he had. He made a list of the things in his head. Todoroki tried beating up Midoriya. Midoriya was accused directly of being closer friends with All Might. Endeavor would be the number 1 hero if All Might was gone. Wait. As the truth finally dawned on him, the color left his face. If he were there, he wouldn't hesitate to hurt Todoroki if he merely lay a finger on Midoriya. Todoroki got him here. He was here so that he'd be out the way. Shall you clever beefy? Too bad you underestimated me and just the lengths I'd go to protect Deku. Midoriya stood up, falling over again as he tried to walk forward. He groaned in pain, pushing himself up to his feet again and rubbing his head. He let his slightly blurred vision to focus on the darkness so that he could make out the chain around his ankle. What the F? He whispered, the familiar sense of panic starting to rise in his chest. He tugged at his leg, trying to free himself. Desperation clawed at him as he pulled harder, gripping the chains and attempting to rip them off. I advise you don't do that. You'll just hurt yourself. A calm voice that would have eased him usually echoed from behind him. Midoriya tensed up and turned around. Todoroki. His expression was cool, though couldn't be detected in the darkness. Why the F am I chained to a wall? He was surprised at how angry he sounded. It scared him a little, but he concluded it was just because of how much time he'd spent with Katsuki. Todoroki didn't seem fazed. One arm was covered in ice, the other starting to flicker with flames. So that you can't run. My father wouldn't like it if you did. His eyes were glassy and clouded, like they seemed to be all the time. Midoriya frowned, glaring at him as he tried to free himself. Let me go. What do you even want? It's what my father wants. He wants me to be the future number 1 hero. Eliminating you is the only way, since it's clear All Might has taken you under his wing. Even 𝗬𝗧𝗏 agrees. Where's Kacchan? Have you hurt him? Your Kacchan is safe where he should be. Todoroki paused for the effect, staring him up and down. In prison. 𝗬𝗵𝗲 Bakugou was not in prison. Officer Kenjio had overused his truth speaker quirk and had passed out, but Sugita had let him go. Bakugou was cleared of the things he was accused for, so as soon as he was out he'd started to fly. He needed to find Uraraka to see where Izuku was. As he was boosting himself through the air, he looked down and saw Uraraka stumbling out of the greenery, leaves and twigs caught in her hair. Beach! Katsuki screeched from above, shooting down and landing in front of her. His red eyes were blazing in anger, but he held his fire. Uraraka stumbled back, hitting a tree. Bakugou. You're supposed to be in prison. No thanks to you. Why the F did you knock me out? Where's Deku? If you've hurt one hair on his head, I swear to God I'm sorry. Uraraka cut him off, tears stinging her eyes. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to hurt you, or him at all. I was jealous of you. Todoroki said that if I helped him, you'd be out of the picture and I could be free to love Midoriya. Bakugou watched, anger spiking inside. He opened his mouth to speak, but he was cut off again. I heard him one day though. He was talking down the phone to his father and said something about Midoriya being gone for good soon. She was crying now, on her knees. I panicked and didn't know what to do. I couldn't back out as there'd be too many questions from Todoroki, so I had to play along. Bakugou, he's going to hurt Izuku and it's all my fault. Bakugou's hand combusted, an explosion crackling through the air. He grabbed Uraraka by her collar, glaring at her hatefully. You're dimming right, it's all your fault. Tell me where that BSil has Deku or I'll kick you into next week. He has him at the old warehouse on the outskirts of time. Please. Tell Midoriya I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. There was a pause, where Katsuki dropped her back on the floor and lit his hands up. Tell him yourself. His tone was cold and non-negotiable. He pointed his hands at the ground and blew up the ground, sending him flying upwards and towards the old warehouse Uraraka had said. He was going to save Deku and no pink-cheeked beach or toothpaste-haired daddy's boy was going to stop him. Detroit smash! Midoriya yelled, lunging at Todoroki and punching him in the stomach. Hard. He was sent flying back by the power of one for all, hitting the wall and growing as he stood back up. The ice flew across the ground, freezing Midoriya in place. He squirmed and hissed, but couldn't move his arm even if he wanted to. He hadn't concentrated when he'd used his quirk, so his arm was broken. He screeched in pain, dropping his head in defeat. He heard a small chuckle from the bipolar boy. Or, can little Deku not get himself free? What a shame, little Deku. This isn't like him. At all. Midoriya thought suspiciously, pulling back from him as much as possible. Todoroki placed a hand on the ice, watching with his sane blank expression and glassy eyes as steam rose and the ice melted. Midoriya dropped to the ground, chattering and ribbing his shoulder to try and get himself warm again. Cold. Need some warming up. The other asked, for sparking up on Ho's arm. Without warning, he shot the flames straight at Midoriya. This made him scream in pain, writhing round to try and get the fire off. No use, he felt like he was melting, the heat was so unbearable. Too warm now. Here, I'll cool you down. The flames ceased, giving Midoriya exactly 2 seconds of composure and breathing time before ice cocooned him again. His entire body stung, the sudden intensely cold temperatures straight after being set on. Fire nearly made him pass out again. The agonizing torture lasted for a while longer. Freezing, heating. Freezing, heating. Repeating that process until Midoriya couldn't even stand up anymore. He was crouched down, shuddering from cold and sweating from heat at the same time. The cold, dark room echoed his quiet pleas to be freed, each one Todoroki ignored completely. There as BLD dropping from somewhere under Izuku's hair and down his lip, he had a blackening eye and a cut on his shoulder. He felt like hell. He wanted it to be over. It was like living a nightmare he couldn't OI. Canadian flag. Both Todoroki and Midoriya's head whipped up at the angry yell. It was coming from one of the foundation roof planks, not sure what they are called, and Todoroki had to squint before making out the figure. Okay, he didn't actually figure it out that easily. The person dropped from the scaffolding, sparks and crannies filling the dense air as he landed squarely on the red and white boy. Midoriya could almost cry as he saw him. Him was none other than Katsuki Bakugou. 173 He hurt. Deku. That's when Bakugou lost it and couldn't wait any longer. He had been sitting in the foundation for a few minutes, sweating forcefully to make his quirk extra powerful. How he'd got in? He'd snuck through a window, naturally. Anyway, Bakugou hadn't realized the full extent of Midoriya's injuries, or else he'd have snapped a lot sooner. When he had though, thank God he then had enough energy stored. He dropped onto Todoroki with a terrifying shriek, sending him to the ground with a grunt of pain. Too soon for comfort though, both boys were back on their feet, Katsuki in front of Izuku protectively and Todoroki standing in a fighting stance. Bakugou merely smirked, the same determined glare in his BLD red eyes. Remember when I told you I'd kill you if you laid a finger on him? He raised his eyebrow, his quirk causing mini explosions from the palm of his hand, glaring at Todoroki. You struck out. Todoroki made the first move, landing a punch on Bakugou's cheek. The ash blonde growled, kneeing him in the gut then kicking him back. If he uses his quirk first, using mine would be self-defense, he thought, smirking a little as he ran forward, ducking under his punch and kicking the backs of his legs. Todoroki's legs gave way and he scrambled to his feet, only to be knocked down by another punch. He glared up at Bakugou, whacking his hand against the ground to send a wall of freezing cold ice his way. He grinned a little until he realized. It was too late, he heard the drop of a heavy chain. The next moment was all a blur, but it included a very large explosion and a certain angry green-haired boy flying through the air towards him. Powered by One for All, Midoriya punched Todoroki backwards, landing as he hit the wall. Bakugou walked beside the shorter boy, hugging him tightly and smiling gently as Midoriya hugged him back. Did he hurt you? A little, but it's nothing I can't live through. That beebxtvh. If he ever dares try this again, no need to finish that. It won't be happening again. Both boys snapped their heads up, hearing a new voice. It was a feminine voice and on closer look, the owner was sitting on one of the rafters. She looked about their age, with long black hair with purple ends, blue eyes that glowed a little in the light and a smile on her face. Beside her sat a boy, presumably her brother. He had fully purple hair that seemed spiky and purple eyes with bags under them. Hitoshi Shinso. Midoriya called, recognizing the male. He looked down and nodded. Izuku Midoriya. I'm sorry about all of this. He and his sister climbed down to greet the two boys. Bakugou pewed his hand in front of his boyfriend protectively, small sparks coming from his hands. Come any closer and I'll blow up your heads. He threatened, his anger rising as he only heard the girl laugh. Katsuki Bakugou. I know all about you. Let's see then. The girl paused, staring directly into Bakugou's eyes until it made him uncomfortable and he looked away. Oh. You're thinking about how much you want to kill that 𝗵𝗃 beebxtvh. Is that right? Is that right? He stalled for a moment, not giving her the answer even though it was a yes. Who are you, Beach? I'm Mimi Shinso. 34 Mimi Shinso Quirk, mine reading 28 What's going on? Where am I? A small voice coughed behind them. All four looked over to Todoroki, who was sitting up and rubbing his head. Why am I hurting all over? What 𝗧𝗵𝗃? Bakugou screeched, running headfirst at the slightly conscious boy. Kakken. Wait. Izuku grabbed his arm, holding him back until he could get in the way. Bakugou growled, stopping as he didn't want to potentially hurt Midoriya. Calm down a little, I got this. He smiled reassuringly at Bakugou and kissed his cheek quickly before looking over at Hitoshi and Mimi. Explain everything. There was a small smile on Hitoshi's lips and he chuckled lightly, shaking his head. Fine, I'll tell. You won't like it though. Setting the scene, it was when me and Mimi were walking home from school. Mimi goes to a different school to UA, so I had to go to her. We were minding our own business when Endeavor approached us. Bakugou tensed up at the number 2 hero's name, his teeth gritting. He allowed Hitoshi to continue though. He told us he needed a favor, knowing from the school my quirk. He said he needed me to brainwash his son into doing whatever he told him to do, anything asked, but only by endeavor. I wasn't told what his plan was, so at first I said no, but he found out my family was having financial troubles, so he offered money. Lots of money, money that would help us. So I agreed. I was told to brainwash him every time it wore off, and he needed to meet his father, so I did. That's why he's been seeming so different lately. He rubbed the back of his neck, staring at Izuku apologetically. Bakugou opened his mouth to speak, but was cut off. He was getting mildly annoyed at how much that seemed to happen. I've only learnt recently what the plan is. It was obvious to Endeavor and Todoroki that All Might was training you for something, so Endeavor wanted to get rid of you. At first he wanted Todoroki to break you mentally, then when Katsuki stepped in he decided physically would have to do. If you were out of the picture, Endeavor could train Todoroki more furiously to make him number one. Hitoshi looked over at Bakugou. He wanted you out the way too and was going to elaborate on the fact that Midoriya would be gone. I don't know what his plan was though. Both boys just stared at him, shocked into silence until Todoroki's voice sounded from behind them again. I helped my father. His words were rather weak, but he forced himself to sit up. I'm sorry, Midoriya. You too, Bakugou. I didn't want to do anything he told me. I couldn't recall anything whenever it wore off though. That's when Hitoshi spoke again, not allowing Izuku or Katsuki to add their input. That's because this time I stopped brainwashing you on my own, not from the time limit. Todoroki, I'm sorry about brainwashing you and making you hurt your friends. I will tell your father I am no longer in his service and I promise you this won't happen again. He walked past the two males and held out his hand for Todoroki, who took it gratefully and leaned against him for support. Wait. Midoriya finally spoke, holding his up like he was surrendering. So this wasn't Todoroki at all. He wasn't thinking. Hitoshi shook his head, not saying another word as he helped a practically passed out boy home. Mimi apologized for the whole thing, quickly running after them. 57 Deku. Neither had exchanged any words on the walk home. Neither knew what to say. Izuku looked up at his nickname, his hand slinking into Bakugou's. Why do you have to be so goddamn adorable? He grumbled, his cheeks dusting a little. He shook his head and pulled the shorter male into a tight hug. Please don't attract any more of this unwanted attention. Even round-faced Beach was in on it. She told me why, but since I'm tired and getting grumpy, I'm gonna make you wait for her to tell you why. You're so annoying. Midoriya's voice rose as he felt strong arms wrap around his waist. He relaxed as he just saw Bakugou. I'm glad you're okay, stupid Deku. He looked away as he spoke, his face heating in embarrassment. After a moment of hugging like that, Midoriya wanted a piggyback. Katsuki non-reluctantly picked him up, holding his thighs so he wouldn't fall back. Kacchan. And I love you. Love you too, Deku. After a long walk, both boys returned to Katsuki's house. The hot-headed teen was sitting behind the shorter, messing with his hair with a small smile at how soft it was. He buried his face in the green hair, hugging him tightly. Izuku was taken a little off guard by the sudden affection, but didn't complain. Both stopped though, as Midoriya's phone buzzed. Instantly, Bakugou grabbed it and typed in the password All Might, earning a squeak of protest from Midoriya. He held him back easily with one hand and pressed the message with his thumb. Uraraka's contact popped up, along with the message, 16-1943 Uravity, Deku. Can we talk about what happened? I need to explain yourself. Scene 66 Pink Cheeks wants to talk to you. He concluded, passing the phone back to his grumbling boyfriend. How did you know my password? It's obvious, Deku. Fine. I'll change it now, hang on. I know, I'll make it Kacchan. Midoriya looked up at him, a blush spreading over his cheeks. You're changing your password to Kacchan. There was a pause, then Izuku lightly punched his knee. Am I really that predictable? Bakugou chuckled lightly, pulling him closer and kissing his lips. Course you are, nerd. That's what I love about you. He smirked, seeing how flustered the other was getting. He glanced at Izuku's phone and held him tighter. By the way, I'm going with you to see Ura Beach. You aren't gonna get taken again. Thanks. Though I'm pretty sure there won't be any more kidnapping. There was a small growl from Bakugou as he held Midoriya protectively. I'm taking no chances. 39 Midoriya was seated happily on Bakugou's back again as he headed to where Uraraka wanted to meet. Once they reached the park, he looked around with a small yawn, nuzzling his face against the back of Katsuki's neck. He made an odd purring noise that made Bakugou's heart skip a beat, murmuring close to his ear. Love you, Kacchan. Let's hope this goes well. His warm breath made Bakugou shudder happily, making it so he could only nod. It wasn't much longer before Uraraka floated down to them, mildly surprised to see Bakugou there. Of course he didn't trust her. Release. She pressed her fingers together and dropped down neatly, facing Midoriya but not meeting his eyes. Gosh, I don't know how to start this. Deku, I'm really sorry. Really sorry. And then she started to ramble about how she was dragged into it all. 13 Uraraka leant against a wall after just witnessing Izuku giving Katsuki an affectionate kiss. She'd expected to see the blonde fire up on him and was more than startled to see him blush and kiss him back, murmuring, "Come on Deku, do you not know what a secret is?" She clasped her hand over her mouth silently, only listening to their quiet talks from behind a wall. But Kacchan, I was just thanking you. You're being adorable again. What are boyfriends for? Uraraka took that chance and bolted, tapping her feet so that she'd speed up. She had heard Bakugou's angry yell chasing after her, but she merely sped up and ran to the bathrooms to hide. They hadn't known she'd been spying on them. After a moment of waiting, completely still and silent in the girls' bathroom, she peeked out and came face to face with 𝗬𝗪 Todoroki. She squeaked and tried to duck back into the bathroom, but her classmate stopped her by holding open the door. He had a wide grin on his face and his eyes were clouded over. Instantly, Uraraka felt uneasy in his presence, which confused her since she was usually completely fine with him. Ochiko, I have an offer I don't think you'll refuse. He spoke. With a somewhat sing-song tone, making Uraraka tense up. She gave him one nod of her head to show she was willing to listen, when inwardly she just wanted to leave. Great. So, it's quite clear that you have a crush on Midoriya. Uraraka's face heated up, but she didn't deny it. She found herself scared to speak in front of him, but his with Bakugou, which is a dilemma. Join with me and we can get them apart for you to step in, swooping him off of his feet. He spoke so quickly it took Uraraka a moment to process what he said. We wouldn't hurt either of them, right? Was all she could say, trying to back into the bathroom but to no avail. Of course not. Not at all. 34, but that had been a lie. He hurt both of you. She finished the story, still not looking at Izuku. I'm so sorry, I never wanted to get anyone hurt. Heroes don't wish hurt upon innocent people, heroes shouldn't assist in that hurting either. I don't deserve to be a hero. There was small tears in the corners of her eyes as she spoke, finally meeting Midoriya's green gaze. She had not expected a hug. The green-haired boy had wrapped his arms around her warmly, not wanting her to cry or for her to doubt herself. Uraraka, don't say that. You are worthy to be a hero. You saw what you did wrong and took the time to apologize, which shows you have regret. Everyone regrets things, but that doesn't make them any less eligible for things. I'm sorry I can't return your feelings, but I hope we can still stay friends. Izuku stared at her hopefully, a smile on his face. Uraraka laughed gently through her tears, hugging him back happily. Yes. Thank you, Deku. This won't happen again. She glanced over at Katsuki, who stood to the side with a tiny smile on his face. It instantly turned to a scowl as she looked at him though. What? He growled, watching her walk towards him. She hesitantly held her hand out to him, staring up at him with wide eyes. Bakugou, I'm sorry for dropping rocks on you and kidnapping your boyfriend. We were never friends, but I still feel horrible for hurting you. I know you probably won't forgive me, so I won't ask for it. I just want to know if we can stay as acquaintances. There was a long moment of silence, in which Uraraka's hand started to fall to her side again in defeat. Then she felt a strong grip on her hand and a shake. We can stay as acquaintances. Mitsuki had gotten up the next morning, ready to scream at her son as he was already late for school. She stopped at his door though, her hand outstretched and about to knock when she heard the muffled voice of Izuku. "Kacchan. You need to get up and dressed or else Mr. Aizawa will keep us both back after school. Hurry up or I'll pinch you." She waited for the shitstorm of cussing, screaming, and explosions to follow, but was more than surprised to only hear a grumble from Katsuki. Fine. Why didn't you wake me up when you did if you wanted me up so much?" There was shuffling, then a very faint thump noise as Bakugou's shirt was presumably thrown onto the ground. Midoriya sounded flustered now. "I tried. You wouldn't budge at all. Whatever he was going to say was cut off." Mitsuki could only guess that her son had stopped him with a kiss. "Shut up, shitty Deku. If you want to get to school so badly, help me out." "Oh okay Kacchan." His voice was a lot quieter and Mitsuki had to run into the other room as the door opened and a very red Midoriya walked out. Once he'd go downstairs to get something for Bakugou, she walked into his room with a wide grin on her face. "What the F do you want, old hag?" She ignored him, replying with a sly smirk. "So, you and Izuku Midoriya." There was a pause, in which Bakugou's face turned a very noticeable shade of red. He picked up his pillow and threw it at her, Mitsuki laughing as she closed the door to his screaming. She turned to walk off again when she was met with Midoriya, who was still blushing. "Hello, Mrs. Bakugou. Why is Kacchan screaming?" "He's always screaming, honey." Mitsuki's voice was a lot more cheerful and soft when talking to anyone that wasn't her son. "And you can call me Mitsuki, Izuku. No need for such formality. How's your mother doing?" "My mum is doing great, thank you. Old hag. Stop harassing my boyfriend." Katsuki growled, walking past his mother in his uniform. "That's my job. Come on Deku, let's go." He grabbed Izuku's hand and started to head down the stairs. The green-haired boy gave Mitsuki a small smile and a wave before calling a goodbye as the door slammed behind him. She let out a little contented sigh, walking into her room and sitting on the bed. "I just hope he doesn't kill him." 1:53 at school, everyone was seated and about to start the lesson when the two burst into the classroom. They would have gotten to school on time, had Midoriya not tripped on his own feet and fallen headfirst into a door handle. "What happened to you?" Aizawa asked, raising an eyebrow. He had the same bored expression on his face as always, not even a hint of concern in his tone. Sorry we're late sir. We woke up late and couldn't find the dash. I asked for the reason you have a black eye," Aizawa cut in, making Midoriya now aware he had a bruise on his eye from the door handle, "not your life story." Oh, sorry. I fell over and hit my eye." "That's nice. I don't really care. Take your seat so I can finally begin this lesson." Izuku nodded and quickly ran to his seat behind Katsuki, who was already sitting down. Shoto wasn't in school that day, which didn't surprise Midoriya. He glanced over at Uraraka, who seemed nervous. He gave her a reassuring smile and she held a thumbs up to him. 85 Class 1A was sent outside to train for a while, so when they were back in the locker room everyone just wanted to go home. Luckily, it was the end of the day anyway. Nobody but Uraraka and Ida cared to question why Midoriya suddenly had a black eye, since he always seemed to have some sort of scar or bruise on his body. Now as he swayed shirts the scars seemed a lot more prominent. So, without warning, Bakugou placed his hand on a small cluster of scars. He heated up his hand to a nice temperature, staring at the boy wordlessly. "Thank you, Kacchan. How did you know it hurt a little?" "It does." Both fell silent for a moment, then Bakugou pewed him closer with a light chuckle. He kissed Midoriya's forehead affectionately and held his hand to drag him out. They were both dressed by then. "Deku. Get your butt down here." Bakugou barked up the stairwell before they left the school grounds. The students walking up and down the stairs glanced at the two and, knowing Bakugou's reputation, quickly carried on walking. Izuku had gone to Recovery Girl to see if she could do anything for his eye, which she could. He was muttering as he walked down the stairs towards Katsuki, his black eye fully gone. He looked tired though, and as he reached the ash blonde he leaned into his chest, tapping his chin as he kept talking to himself. "Deku. You're doing that weird shot where you talk to yourself again." Bakugou growled, waiting for Midoriya to stop. He didn't, so he lightly cuffed him round the head. "Stop muttering, goddammit." Midoriya stopped at this, jumping and staring up at Bakugou apologetically. Sorry Kacchan. He's a 𝗵𝗲𝗍𝗬𝗓, yeah whatever. Just hurry up." He grabbed the smaller boy's hand and started to pull him out of the school. 15 times skip 2 hours later. The blonde dragged the green into the streets, making sure he was close by. He would not have a repeat of yesterday. He could hear his Deku asking a few questions, as they weren't headed in a direction commonly used, but Bakugou didn't budge in speaking. He cracked a smile though, picking Midoriya up so that they could get to the place faster. He hurried along until he finally reached the spot he was heading for, placing Izuku down. "Kacchan, move your hands." Izuku squeaked. They'd gotten to a field behind some of the houses, but before Midoriya could look around his vision had gone dark. "Sure. This is supposed to be romantic." Bakugou grumbled, glad that Midoriya couldn't see his deep blush. On the contrary, Midoriya wasn't hiding his at all. "Romantic. Who have you been taking advice from?" There was a short pause until Midoriya guessed, Ashido. Bakugou fell silent and the green-haired boy giggling lightly. "Shut up, nerd," he grumbled, hugging Midoriya from behind and dropping his hands from his eyes. In front of Izuku stood a large tree, glittering with fairy lights and fireflies. His eyes widened in wonder at the appealing sight in front of him, the stars shining brightly in the sky to add to the effect. Bakugou stood behind him with a large grin as Midoriya walked closer to the tree. The trunk seemed to sparkle in the moonlight, making the small clearing the tree was in look magical and pretty. The taller came up behind him, bowing slightly and holding out his hand. "Care to dance?" He smiled, pulling Izuku closer as he took his hand. He pulled out his phone, opening up the music and pressing the play button. He placed the phone down and kissed the shorter's cheek before starting to dance around the tree. Neither boys had any coordination or idea on how to dance, so they just ended up laughing and spinning each other around. At the end of the song, they flopped on their backs, laying in the grass under the gleaming tree. Both were laughing and chatting hushly, almost like they wanted to keep their time there just to themselves. Their secret. Midoriya thought it was completely wonderful. "Deku." Bakugou stood up, reaching for Izuku's hand to help him up. He faced him, leaning their heads together gently as he spoke. "You know I find you absolutely f***ing adorable and love you a heck ton, right?" He got a nod and a small giggle as a response. "Well, I wanted to give you something to show it." He fumbled with something in his pocket before pulling out a little box and handing it to Midoriya. Inside the box was a little green bracelet, red intertwining with it. The shades were just right so that they worked well together and there was little beads woven into it. Izuku's blush only increased. "Kacchan, it's appealing. Thank you so much." He nearly knocked the blonde off of his feet with the force of the hug he gave. Bakugou chuckled, his face bright red. Yeah. I guess that pink thing has good ideas sometimes." He smiled, though tried to hide it. He was mostly trying to hide how very happy he was to see Izuku enjoying himself. "Kacchan. Yeah. You're amazing. I hope you know that." Midoriya gently booped their noses together, giggling sweetly. A smile spread across Bakugou's face, though he managed to keep some of his usual scowl in his features. "Me? Nah. You are the star of the show here, Deku. 65, you are the star of the show."